Thank you. So good morning, members, officers, and any members of the public who are viewing the live stream. Welcome to this additional meeting of the South Cambridgeshire District Council Planning Committee on the 11th of December 2024. My name is Councillor Bradnam and I'm the chair for this meeting. I'm supported here by Councillor Fain, who is the vice chair, and members, would you like to introduce yourself? So, Councillor Khan.
Ariel Khan, Councillor for Horston and Comerton Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Garvey.
I'm the district councillor for Girton and surrounding villages.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Morning everyone, Jimmy Hawkins, Caldicott Ward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Redrup.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Lisa Redrup, one of the members for the Harston and Comerton Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson Wood.
Good morning, Councillor Jackson Wood, one of the members for the Shelford Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jeff Harvey, I'm the member for Borsham Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Sandford.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Peter Sanford, one of the members for Caxton and Papworth Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Williams, Whittlesford Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Heather Williams.
Councillor Heather Williams, the Mordens Ward.
Thank you very much. So, and we are supported at the top table by Rebecca Smith, who's the delivery manager, okay, by Vanessa Blaine, who's our legal advisor, and Simon Hill, who is our Democratic Services Officer. Thank you. And Aaron Clark, who is our producer for today. Thank you very much all. So those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of images and sound recordings for a webcast and archived recording. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. So, just to clarify, the process for all of the planning applications will be as follows. Firstly, the case officer will give a brief introduction to the report. The committee may then ask questions of clarification of the case officer. Then registered speakers will be invited to speak for 3 minutes. There are 3 minutes for those speaking in support and for those speaking against. But once that speaking is done, public speakers are not able to join in the debate. But members may ask them questions of clarification. The committee will then debate the item, and at the end of the debate and conclusion of any questions of clarification, providing there is no alternative proposal, the officer recommendation will be read out, and I will request a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation. I'll ask members to vote on the officer recommendation or any alternative proposal, and the vote of each member will be recorded. Members are asked to note, in accordance with the Council's current public speaking at Planning Committee protocol, that after the objector and supporter have spoken, exceptionally, the Chair or committee members through the Chair may ask speakers to clarify matters relating to their presentation. If a member arrives after the start of the application or leaves the chamber once an application has commenced, they are unable to take any further part in that application, either by way of entering into debate, questions of clarification or the vote. So, item 2 is apologies. So, Simon, I believe we have some apologies for today. Could you tell us who they are?
Yes, Chair, you have apologies from members Councillor Martin Khan and Councillor Handley, and substitutes you have Councillor Garvey and Councillor Jackson Wood.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. So members, do any of you have declarations of interest with regard to any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Khan?
Yes, I have an interest in item 7. I'm an alumnus of Invicton Village College, but I was never part of any sports teams, and I come to the matter completely afresh.
Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. Right. So we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which are on, start at page 5 in our agendas. Does anybody have any matters of accuracy for those minutes? I can see Councillor Sandford and Councillor Heather Williams.
Just Chair, but I'll abstain from this as I wasn't present at the meeting.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Sandford?
Thank you, Chair. There are two very minor typos on page 7 which ought to be corrected. Under points of clarity, the sixth one, the site was in the middle area or centre. I think there's a missing of there. And the following paragraph, the committee was addressed by and objector. I think there's a surplus D in there that needs to be removed.
So the committee was addressed by an objector?
That would make sense.
Do you think, my understanding is that it was, the D is in error? In other words, an objector, not and?
That would be my assumption as well, yes.
Okay, is everybody happy with that? Right, okay, with those two minor amendments, Simon, are you happy that those are agreed as a true record of the meeting? Can I take your affirmation?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Simon, we'll deal with the signing of the minutes afterwards, thank you. And then there is a second set of minutes starting on page 11, which are for Wednesday the 13th of November. Any items of accuracy on there? No? Okay, so can I take that by affirmation that you're happy those are a true record?
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you very much. So those are unamended, thank you. Righto, so then we move on to item 5, which is the first substantive item on the agenda, which is land to the south of 86 Crystal Road, Falmere. And we'll start off with, just bear with me, thank you, with Tom Gray, who is on screen for us. Thank you. So Tom, do you want to present your report, please? Thank you.
I think it's the... Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you just confirm you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks, Tom. Or we can all hear you.
Great, thank you. So the application is at land to the south, 86 Crystal Road, Falmere. Firstly, I'd like to draw members' attention to the amendment sheet published yesterday. This concerns condition 14 with minor amendments to that condition. The application is for an outline application for the erection of 5 self or custom build dwellings with some matters reserved except for access from Crystal Road and layout. This is the site location plan. The application site is located just to the south of Falmere, with the village centre located towards the north. The vehicular access would be from Crystal Road, marked here, and there would be a pedestrian access to the north of Landacre here. This is an aerial image of the site. This is the site here. Vehicular access would be from here, and again, pedestrian access here. What this aerial image doesn't show is that there has been a development that has been carried out to the north of the application site within Shore Close, which was for 16 dwellings that has been constructed and completed. So in terms of site constraints, there are protected trees along the eastern and western boundaries of the site. Greenbelt is located across the other side of Crystal Road. There is also areas of best and most versatile agricultural land within the site. The development framework itself is located to the north, approximately 100 metres from the application site itself. This is denoted by this black dashed line. This map is just showing the agricultural land classification. So the application site itself, where the dwellings would be located, was within grade 3B agricultural land. So this is not classified as best and most versatile agricultural land, although there would be an access road going through, just taking up a sliver of the grade 2 and grade 3 agricultural land to facilitate the development. So there is a site history to this. There was a application for 15 self-build dwellings back in 2022, which was refused and the appeal subsequently dismissed. This was on the following basis. So it was the planning inspector identified substantial localized harm to the character and appearance of the area. There was a loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, and to a degree, it was to a degree which it was located in a sustainable location. So the applicant has worked with the local planning authority to address those regional refusal. Just here, just the comparison between the two schemes. The one on the left was the previous proposal, and on the right is the current proposal. So previously, the proposal was took up a larger area of the site within this area here, which is not now proposed. This caused localized harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, but also it took up best and most versatile agricultural land. The plots have also been revised. So whereas before there was 6 plots in this sort of northwestern area, this has been revised down to 5, and the plot layout has also been taken into account in terms of the built forms located nearby. So you'll notice on the right hand of the screen, this is the proposed site plan now, and they're taking into account number 88 Crishall Road. The dwellings are the indicative layout of the dwellings would not go any more to the western boundary than the existing neighbouring property of number 88, and also Newlands, the property of Newlands located here as well. So it's taken into account the existing built form in the area. There would be also a substantial buffer, sort of landscaping buffer on this western side. And landscaping proposals also for the south of the access road along here, and also within the blue line of the applicant is also substantial buffer along here to screen the development. This is the proposed site plan looking at sort of more closely. So as I say, it's carefully considered its context. The pedestrian access would be to the south west of Lanacre along here, and the pedestrian access would then go down the drive of Lanacre, and which also serves number 88 Crishall Road, and then pedestrians were to be able to walk from there into the village. This is a view taken in the springtime along Crishall Road, looking towards the application site in the distance. You'll see this quite substantial evergreen tree line here, majority of which will be retained and screen the development to some extent. There'll be some screening along this boundary here, this southern boundary, and also along, as I say, along the access road in the distance. This is taken from in the field. This is taken from the submitted landscape visual impact assessment, looking across the field in the summertime, looking towards number 88 Crishall Road in the distance here. Landacre is just behind these evergreen trees here. This is taken from the current farm access, looking where, and this farm access would become the formal vehicular access point to the site, which would be alongside the fence, which forms a boundary to Landacre. This is taken from London Road, so to the southwest of the application site. So looking across the site towards development, this is taken again from the LVIA. That's the approximate extent of the site marked here. This is number 88 Crishall Road, and then the development to the north, which is the Shore Close development here. This is the one on the left is location of site. So looking from Shore Close, so looking across towards towards the application site, and the right hand side is the Shore Close development. So the main considerations are the principal development, self-custom build housing need, impact upon the countryside and landscape, and other matters. So in terms of the planning balance, in terms of approval, it would provide additional self and custom build housing to meet the substantial identified shortfall. This is given significant weight in the planning balance. There'll be some economic benefits. There'll be biodiversity net gain in excess of mandatory requirements. In terms of the negatives, it'd be against the spatial strategy for the district. There'll be, because of the absence of several key facilities and lack of limited sustainable travel options, this is given modest weight against development. And there would be some limited, in officer's view, localised harm to the character and appearance of the countryside. The officer recommendation is therefore of approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tom. Right, so members, I just wanted to point out that on the photograph that Tom showed us of the site, which looked at first glance as if the land was completely bare, actually that isn't the case. It's grass at the moment. It just looked like it on the photograph because I think it was taken in the summer. So I just wanted to be clear that it is a grass site if you didn't see it on the site visit. So members, any matters of clarification for the officer? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I know on the conditions, when it comes to the archaeological condition, it says about the applicant or successors, but on some of the other conditions, it doesn't say about successors. Obviously, these plots are often sort of sold on or what have you. Just wondering if there's a particular reason why it was included on that condition, but not on the others, and whether that's something that we need to include given it's self-build, or whether the successors would naturally then have to follow through on the conditions, because that's how we normally have it. But I noticed on the archaeological one.
Just remind us which number the archaeological condition is.
I believe off the top of my head.
Number 4?
Yeah,
okay.
quite early on.
So, Rebecca, do you want to advise us on that, or would that be for Tom? In fact, I'll come on to another matter. Oh yes, number 4. I think it's because the archaeological work is done before, isn't it? Do carry on.
However, all the conditions run with the permission, so it's, I'm trying to get my words out straight, erroneous, I think is the word. It's not necessary to have that wording within that condition, so we can take it out if necessary. It's actually the standard wording that comes from county archaeology. We just use their wording for the condition, but it's not needed because the permission, all of the conditions run with the permission, so whoever was implementing would need to
Councillor Heather Williams was saying she was observing that there was no reference to in perpetuity in it, but you're saying it's not needed.
No, she was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were saying that that this condition refers to the applicant, agent or successors in title and none of the other conditions
I see what you
do.
mean. Right.
Whereas actually none of the conditions need to refer to it, so it doesn't need to be in this condition either.
No, okay. Before we come on to our other speakers, I just wanted to point out that the... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, your interpretation of my question was incorrect.
Sorry,
It's
yes.
And I'm
But
clarifying
Rebecca's was
that
right,
Rebecca
yes.
got my interpretation correct.
Good, okay,
But
sorry.
I think it's important that we're as consistent as possible and looking sort of outside in that could look ambiguous. So if we can tidy that up, I think it's probably best, and then we're consistent across all of our applications.
That's fine, thank you very much. And we can make sure that is so. Sorry, I just wanted to draw members' attention to the planning condition 14, which related to the pedestrian access, and that clarifies that that will be access over that pedestrian access past Lanark in perpetuity. So that one is confirmed in perpetuity. And Jeff Harvey, Councillor Harvey, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, two questions, if I may. Firstly, quite surprising to see that the classifications of the agricultural land use classifications sort of follow what apparently are sort of field boundaries, and you can have such a low grade abutting to high, because you would have thought that the value of land would be a sort of innate feature of the geography, really. So I'm quite interested to know, just for our information, really, what the history of land classification is and its potential to be amended. And the second question was, whether you could just inform the committee on the details of the self-build classification, because it looked as though the properties plan were all sort of quite congruent. My understanding was that in order to be a self-build, it had to have sort of significant custom or input from the potential owner, which you would expect to lead to a more disparate sort of design of properties.
Thank you. Rebecca, can you respond to that?
I can take the self-build question. I don't know if Tom can answer if there's any change in the agricultural land classification on this site, but I can take the self-build. So it's an outline application at the minute with, as you can see, all of the hold on, let me get my answer correct. Yeah, it is an outline application at the minute. So when the reserve matters applications come in, that will be the point at which whoever signs up and whoever applies is somebody from our self-build register. They need to be on our register, and they will have a degree of involvement in the design of the property. So this is just the outline, essentially, to get the principle, and then once the reserve matters applications come in, assuming usually for individual plots, that will be when the person who is applying is the one that's off our self-build register and is involved in the design. Tom, do you know any information about the history of the land classification on this site?
So that map, the land classification is taken from the land classification use survey. So they would have taken samples from various areas and then use those samples to that dictated then the grade of land, and it's quite a technical thing. I think it relies on sort of soil type and drainage and things like that, and how much gravel and things in there. And so all that feeds into the final grade that they decide on. So yeah, it's quite a technical document, but that's all I can say on that. If that helps.
I believe it will have been done a while ago, an original survey.
Yeah.
In 1988, apparently.
Thank you.
So, just pause, members.
Thank you. I can't remember the date.
Thank you. Notice the lights continue to flash after the fire alarm test, but that should not indicate alarm. Okay, so land classification was done in 1988, or up to 1988 probably, and hasn't really changed since. But yes, I think, if I may say from my own experience of agriculture, the land classification can change with usage. And so that might have influenced, what has been done there may have influenced the classification to some degree. Okay, so Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. I hope it's okay. I was wondering if it's possible to show us where the footway extension would be on Crystal Road. I just wasn't quite sure from the maps, just to check that it does.
There's a footpath.
They do have a continuous footpath all the way into the village. And then the other one, I think, has already been touched on from Councillor Harvey's question. It was about, if it's approved, should there be a condition restricting first occupation to those on the self-build, custom-build register? But I'm wondering if that should be with the reserve matters or if that should be with this one. So, thank you.
Okay. So firstly, can we look at the, Tom, do you have any Google imagery of Crystal Road, just to show us that there is a continuous footpath through? Tom, are you speaking to us? Because we can't hear you. You're on. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So I can definitely show you the access drawing that they've provided, which might help.
Actual imagery, so that we can see if there is actually a footpath along there. But sorry, if your illustration, if their illustration shows it, then obviously by all means use that. How are you getting on? Ah, right.
Okay, yeah. So the top left, so this one here, I'll zoom in a bit. So in terms of access for pedestrians, so this is the driveway here, which pedestrians would walk along, get to this point, and then there'd be a footway here, which ties into the foot.
Is that the Shaw Close entrance?
Yeah, so this is the Shaw Close entrance here. So footway here, and then they would cross that to the other footway, which is part of the existing informal, which is part of the existing footway that forms round Shaw Close, and then pedestrians then cross that road onto the opposite side, and then walk in the village into the village from there. So this is already existing here. This bit here. Yeah.
Is that answering your question, Councillor Redrup?
Yes, thank you. I just hadn't quite followed that.
Okay.
Drawing. Thank you.
Vanessa, you were going to respond to the second question.
Yes, through you, Chair. So there doesn't need to be a condition. It's dealt with by an obligation within the 106, which I've drafted. So there's a protection period for residents within that 106. Where they have to be on the register, etc. But it is protected in the 106.
Thank you very much.
Okay, right. And Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just two questions. One for the case officer, and possibly one for Rebecca. Just on the for the case officer, paragraph 1029, I think it is. There's a summary of the planning inspector's decision for another self-build application in Falmere on Triplo. I know this was touched on, but I was just wondering if the case officer could just say a little bit more about this question of sustainable or the sustainable nature of the site, because in paragraph 1029 it seems to suggest that in refusing the application for self-build on Triplo Road in Falmere, the inspector laid quite a lot of emphasis on the unsustainable nature of the site's location. and looking at a map, I would, if anything, think this site is a little bit less sustainable than the other one, because the Triplo site is a bit more in the main village than this one. Whereas the balance sheet we saw at the end, which was really useful, sort of indicated we should only put moderate weight on the unsustainable travel issue. So I was wondering if there is a perceived difference between this application and the Tripler Road one, and maybe if the officer could explain a bit about why. It seems, anyway, or maybe it's my misunderstanding, it seems we've got quite a lot of weight in the Tripler one, but maybe not so much in this one.
Should we just get the case officer to answer that one first? Thank you. Tom, can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I believe on the Triplo Road one, there was no footway at all, and the inspector identified there was no pedestrian connectivity to the village itself, and he also had concerns about lighting. From memory, I think that's what he had concerns about. In this scheme, the inspector on the previous 15 self-build scheme said that there was good pedestrian connectivity to the village through a footway. So although there was though the village doesn't contain many doesn't contain some facilities and services within the village itself, and there is limited sort of bus services. He sort of gave the weight, the harm in terms of that aspect, sort of moderate weight. So my conclusion aligns with the inspector's conclusion in that regard. For this site, it's sort of only given modest weight against the proposal.
Thank you. And in terms of the connectivity, of course, on the approach to the site would pass the bus shelter. I don't know if there are services coming from that bus shelter, but there was a bus shelter there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, thank you. That was very helpful. Could I just have my
second?
Yeah, my second one was just Rebecca again, just about this self-build register. Thanks for the table and the way you sort of changed it from last time. That's really helpful. Just a small question, really, because again, obviously self-build customer, Vanguard Authority, we're invited to put some weight on that. But with the numbers of people who've been added to the register, are we obliged to just have that as a sort of net figure? So presumably people drop off it as well, but does the legislation just say we just have to look at the number of people who've joined it? And I think, if my understanding is right, you can sign up to as many of these things as you like, and you could live in, Ullapool or Aberdeen, and you could still sign up to our self-build register, and there's nothing we can do in terms of local. Is that correct? That we just have to take the number as the number is?
Yeah, unfortunately that is correct. You can sign up to as many self-build registers as you like, and we can't actually remove people from the register unless they write to us and ask us to remove them. So as you'll see, we've actually got the most recent figures in this month compared to the reports that we had last month, and it was in October 2020 to October 2021, it was quite a bumper year for number of people adding to the register, but actually was also quite a good year 3 years later in terms of delivery. But you'll see that the figures then for the next few years, base periods, they start reducing. So, we can but hope that at some point we'll level out. But yeah, unfortunately, the legislation was changed so that it is actually cumulative. So we now, rather than just drawing a line under it saying we didn't deliver last year, oh well, let's start again, it's actually cumulative. So we have to add the number of people to the register each year, and then we get to add the number of permissions together as well.
Thank you, it's very useful.
Thank you. And I think it might be helpful for us as a planning committee to have a briefing about this, how this works and how it's being used.
I think it's either January or February's training session for members.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. And Councillor Fane, did you want to speak?
No need, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, so thank you very much. That's questions of clarification. So we'll come on to our speakers then. So we have Peter Biggs, who's the agent for PJP Planning, who's presenting the application. Gosh, you're a very long way away. So welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. So you have 3, and we'll advise you as you get to 2.5. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This outline application was made after a pre-application submission to the Council earlier this year and takes into account comments that were raised by officers during a site meeting and in their written response. The officer's pre-application response advised that 5 self-built custom-built dwellings in this location, along with soft landscaping mitigation and containment within the building extent of neighbouring properties, was acceptable when weighed in the planning balance. During the consultation period of this outline application, the Parish Council has not raised an objection to the proposed development, and nor have any members of the public. In respect to the location of the development, the case officer addresses the issue of the site being located outside the development framework in their report and considers the development to have limited localised countryside harm. This is due to the proposal being integrated visually within the built form of the village. Overall, the officer concludes that the provision of 5 custom-built dwellings would help meet the significant shortfall in the district of 418 plots, provide economic benefits, sustainable design and construction, and biodiversity net gain with above the mandatory 10%, which together outweigh the identified harm. A further benefit that we would like to highlight is that Falmere Housing Needs Survey, undertaken in 2020, identified 7 households within Falmere that wanted a self-built plot. This requirement remains unfulfilled and proves a village need as well as a district need, which is a material consideration. In terms of weighing up the positive considerations of the proposed scheme, it is important to note that the officers agree with the applicant that the village does provide a moderate level of facilities and services available within the village. It is considered the village will become even more sustainable a location for housing through the planned expansion at the Butts for new employment development and cafe, along with the proposed Gen 2 expansion to create in excess of 500 new jobs in the village, along with a further cafe, gym and shuttle buses to local train stations and the park and ride. The councils and service providers have already made changes to improve bus services to and from the village, with an increased frequency of the 26 and 31 bus service and a new bus service 7A, which connects through to other rural centres, the A505 and Trumpington Park and Ride. There is also a regular bus service 250 metres away that takes students to and from Melbourne Village College. The village is therefore well served by public transport and supports the sustainable credentials of providing new housing for the village, such as proposed in this application. The proposed housing will also help support the local village primary school, church, public house and village hall, which are all within walking distance of the application site. Taking into account the positive factors of the proposed development that have been outlined in this application and by your officers in their report, members are requested to grant outline planning permission for this application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biggs. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you myself, can you confirm that the proposed vehicular access is wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other, or a delivery lorry and a car to pass each other?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, does anybody have any questions to raise?
I see none.
I don't see any either. Right, thank you very much, Mr. Biggs. Thank you for presenting to us today. So, members, does anybody want to kick off the debate? Councillor Heather Williams.
So, looking through the representations, obviously there's been a request around a construction, and I think that is amply covered in the conditions. I think we're in a situation, I very much would like to see this not developed. It's outside the framework. We've put frameworks in for a reason. but we are where we are in relation to self-builds, and we've been in that position for some time now, and to be honest, we've seen worse proposals than this one. At least this one is, very close to other housing and is an extension of the current framework as opposed to completely in the middle of nowhere. I think this application is much better than the one that was refused before. I think the other one went too far, and that the 5 properties there probably will suffice. And when I look at the one objection from the landscape officer, even they feel sort of an element of resentment that it could happen and that other safeguards are in place. The only thing is it's outside the framework. Were this not self-build, absolutely not. But it is, and that's how we must determine it. So with that, I will listen to others through the debate, but I don't feel there's a lot of grounds for refusal at this point.
Indeed. Do any other members wish to speak on this? Councillor Sandford, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I should start by acknowledging the efforts the applicant has made to reduce the size of this development to something more appropriate for the site. You can see on the site visit that the proposed 5 dwellings would be largely screened either by the existing property or by the trees all around the site. It would be almost invisible, I think, from the green belt across the road. I think Councillor Williams already commented that this is adjacent to Shaw Close, so if Shaw Close was considered sustainable, this property, these properties should also be considered sustainable. And last but by no means least, on the loss of agricultural land, I think Chair was being should we say, generous in calling it grassland. I would say it was rough scrub, which has obviously not been used for agricultural purposes recently. And given the shape and size of the plot, probably never would be financially viable for agricultural use. So, again, agree with Councillor Williams, though, particularly with the self-build coming into the picture, I don't see any grounds for refusal myself either.
Thank you, Councillor Sandford. Councillor Dr. Williams.
Councillor Hawkins was before me.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. I wasn't going to say very much anyway. I was just going to say there's no objection from the parish. There's no objection from the neighbours. I can't see any reason to refuse this. It gives us housing. We need housing. So I'm in favour.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And Councillor Dr. Timmy Hawkins.
He took the words out of my mouth.
Okay. So I agree. I visited the site on previous occasions for previous applications in this area, and so it's familiar to me. I think this application is preferable to the previous submissions, and thank you to the officers for the work that you've done to make this one more acceptable, in particular to secure the pedestrian access past Lanacre in perpetuity to join up with the existing footpath outside Shaw Close. I think that's very helpful. And as Councillor Sandford says, I think this site will be well screened. It is outside the development framework, but I think this is a less intrusive option at the moment. And it does provide plots for self-built housing, and we're assured that there are people within Falmere who'd like to have a self-build option. So that will support their interest in self-build, which is good, and it will provide more housing. So I, like others, cannot see any reason to refuse. So if we have no further requests to speak, can I suggest we go to the recommendation? Rebecca, would you like to remind us of the recommendation then?
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to the planning conditions that are set out in the report, with a minor amendment to condition 4 to make sure it's consistent with the other conditions, and also for the amendment that's in the update report for condition 14, along with the completion of a section 106 agreement, heads of terms of which are in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So the recommendation is on page 11. I'd like to propose that, but can I seek a seconder? Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins, thank you very much. So can we go to a vote then, please? Or can we take this, if nobody's speaking against it, can we take it? Oh, look, we'll go to a vote. Thank you. Gosh, who knew there were 46 of us present?
53.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll make it 11 of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Who's not registering? Okay. Thank you very much. So that's unanimously 11 in favour of this application. So thank you very much, members. Right, and thank you very much, Mr. Biggs, for attending. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, so we move on to item agenda 6, which is land adjacent to 50 Middleton Way at Fen Drayton in the ward of Swavesey, which is an outline application with all matters reserved for the erection of 2 self-built dwellings, and we had a site visit there on the 4th of December, which was very useful for those of us, for people who had not seen the site before. I'm filling in to allow Tom time to book up. Yeah, that's fine. Just to get online. He didn't want to. Yes, exactly. He did say he had virus. He didn't really want to.
He was going to do it from home, but didn't have the screen set up okay at home, so he's come in literally for this, and now he's gone again. Yeah. Right.
So we. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So, Tom, do you want to do your presentation for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application before members today is an outline planning application with all matter reserved for the erection of 2 self-built dwellings at land adjacent to 50 Middleton Way in Fen Drayton. Officers are recommending refusal. So in terms of the material considerations for members to consider, so as the principle of development, the application site is located outside of any defined development framework boundary, but the application, as the previous application that you've just considered, is for 2 self-built dwellings, so there is weight attributed in regards to that. Other potential considerations are the impact on the character and appearance of the area, and then whether there's any ecological or biodiversity harm as a result. Officers are recommending the application for refusal on the fact that it is outside of the development framework boundary, and that the site is in an unsustainable location, and also insufficient information has been provided regarding biodiversity net gain. Just want to remind members as well that the application is an outline application with all matters reserved, so that includes access, landscape, scale, or everything is reserved. So in terms of the site itself, so the site is located, so it's the parcel in red. At present there are a couple of greenhouses, but they've actually been removed. Number 50 is to the south. There's quite a lot of development that's happened in and around Middleton Way. I have a separate slide that I'll show members just regarding that level of development. but the site is located within the Fen Drayton Former Land Settlement Association estate, which does have its own specific policy requirements. But as I indicated to members, the application is for 2 self-built dwellings, and because it is outline, there are no details regarding the site's layout, elevations. The applicant has provided an indicative site layout, but I just want to make this clear to members that this is completely indicative because it is outlined with all matters reserved. This is not how any scheme, should an application go against an officer recommendation, be considered. Obviously, all of that level of detail is not in consideration of this application. I alluded to the fact that there's quite a lot of development that's happened in and around the site. Because the site is located within the former Land Settlement Association estate, there is a specific planning policy regarding the erection of or redevelopment of previously eligible agricultural buildings, and that footprint can be used in order to erect new dwellings in this specific area, which is outside the development framework boundary. I want to make clear to members that this application is not seeking to comply with that policy. I have got the policy in due course in one of my slides, just so it's clear for members what that policy is. But this application is not seeking to comply with this policy. So that's why officers have considered that the application is unacceptable in principle because of its unsustainable location. So I'm just going to get my pointer up so that members I can sort of point to members certain developments in the area. So previously, and these are the most sort of prominent ones so the old A14 or the A1307 runs along the southwest here. There is an industrial site here which gains access from a separate road off the old A14. 3 dwellings have been approved in this southern portion here. They were all approved under the former Land Settlement Association policy, H5. So there was eligible buildings within this site here. Oh, sorry, Kyle. There is eligible buildings within this site here where their footprint was used to erect the 3 dwellings there. So that was all done under the land settlement policy. Number 50 itself has previously had an application approved. So some of the buildings that were on site, that eligible footprint that was allowed, a dwelling has been constructed to the rear back here. It's not on the map because it's new. Members would have seen that on the site. I do also have photos to indicate that. In addition to that, the 4 dwellings that have been approved here, once again, they were all done under the former Land Settlement Association estate policy. So they were all from eligible buildings. The only site along Middleton Way that has been approved outside of the Land Settlement Association policy was a property a bit further to the north under 40A. The reason my officers considered that was acceptable is because they were existing buildings that had been used. Although they weren't eligible buildings, it was still using a footprint of buildings in the estate. So that's the reason why officers considered that one acceptable. And obviously there's no buildings on the site for this to be used as considered acceptable. The site, the Middleton Way it's bound and unbound in different places, but it is a private road. So Fen Stanton is approximately 800 metres to a kilometre to the west, and then Fen Drayton is approximately 1.5, 1.6 kilometres up Middleton Way, and it's quite a bit further up there. Middleton Way is unlit and unbound in parts, and so is the road down here. So it's considerable distances to the local services. This is the relevant policies that I was referring to, so policy H5, which basically indicates that you can develop dwellings in the former Land Settlement Association estate, but it does have to be under certain criteria, and it has to meet those certain criteria. the proposal does not seek to meet those criteria under this application. So therefore, in policy S7, which is this one, when it's outside development frameworks, if it's supported by other policies, then development is acceptable. Obviously, this is not seeking and is not compliant with any other policies within the local plan. So officers have then considered whether a gradual encroachment into their countryside and whether it's in a sustainable location. Officers have considered that although it isn't gradual encroachment into the open countryside, it would be in an unsustainable location. Just quickly run through the site photos. So this is the entrance. Obviously it rained a lot, so it looks very wet. So this is the site from the north. So this is looking south towards the A1307. This is just slightly further to the left. Sorry, the pictures aren't that clear from here. But there are two buildings on site. They're not eligible buildings. They are just outbuildings that were formerly associated with number 50. So they couldn't use those footprints. The dwelling here that I have highlighted somehow, that is the one that was approved, so that is number 50. So that is the building and the dwelling that was approved under the former Land Settlement Association policy, which is why that one was approved there. This is the access to it. There's some dwellings to the left. They were so they're 49B and C, I believe. So they're the other self-built dwellings. Not self-built dwellings, so the other Land Settlement Association dwellings that have already previously been approved and were approved under the Land Settlement Association estate. And then this is from the south of the site, so this is those dwellings that I was just talking about, so the 4 that were located to the north. Obviously, as you can see, the site has been completely cleared. And then this is just from the entrance, so this is from the south of the site, so this building here is number 50. The dwellings would be located in and around here somewhere. As I've indicated, it's indicative, but these are the dwellings at number 49, the 4 dwellings that are approved there. So there's been a couple of third-party representations and consultee comments. So there has been an objection from the ecology officer regarding biodiversity net gain. There's no objections from the local highway authority, but the parish council have lodged an objection. And there's been several third-party comments. Some have objected. There are some in support as well. So in regards to objection, there's concerns that it's going to set a precedent. There's highway safety concerns, concerns with the use of the access road and residential amenity impacts. But those in support have indicated that the proposal is sensitive to the area, it addresses housing needs, helps with burglary concerns, and obviously it helps with the self-build need. In terms of the planning balance, the reasons for approval would be that the proposal would provide 2 self-built dwellings. That is obviously given weight in the planning balance. But obviously officers are recommending refusal, the reasons being that the proposal is in an unsustainable location and would conflict with the purposes of the local plan, and the proposal does not evidence how biodiversity net gain would be provided. So officers are recommending for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tom. Right, so do members have any questions of clarification for the case officer?
Peter Sanford.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on the covering page. Appreciate it says ward/parish, but just to be clear, it's Fen Drayton Parish, not Swavesey Parish.
So it's the Swavesey ward. It's the Swavesey ward, yeah. So Swavesey ward covers Fen Drayton as well.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But perhaps if we could have, as it is ward/parish, have the ward/parish. Otherwise, on a surface glance, that could be a bit misleading.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Sandford.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have guidance from the legal officer? There's been a lot of references to the Land Settlement Association policies today. Are they a material consideration for this committee today, please?
Thank you.
The applicant isn't applying under the Land Settlement Association policy. which requires a replacement of eligible footprint, they're applying as just for self-build. So the references to the Land Settlement Association policy relate to how and why there are other new builds in the vicinity. Number 50 has already used their relevant eligible buildings to build a replacement footprint dwelling, but we were just trying to clarify why there are other new builds in the vicinity, but this one isn't applying under the Land Settlement Association policy.
Thank you.
Yes, and indeed, I asked officers to just explain the existence of the other modern buildings on the site for clarity, because it's quite perplexing otherwise to see them. Right, okay, so Councillor Dr. Timmy Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that, does that mean then that this area, which is governed by that H5 policy, anything that needs to be built on there has to be built based on that policy?
Apparently.
And it is still applicable?
So there is a supplementary planning document, the Fen Drayton Former Land Settlement Association supplementary planning document. Any application that is built, whether that is in accordance with this policy or not, essentially has to comply with that supplementary planning document. But as Rebecca was just saying, just to make it clear that this is not seeking to apply under the policy, but the Land Settlement Association, SPD, does provide quite a lot of guidance in regards to building design and sustainability information.
If I can just add on to that one, so there are various policies within the Land Settlement Association, SPD. The one that we've referenced, I think it's 5, isn't it? Try and get the number right, is about eligible buildings that can be demolished for new buildings to be replaced. However, there are other policies that relate to the design of any buildings within it. So those ones would still be applicable, but they haven't applied under the eligibility for erection of a replacement footprint.
It's interesting. Yes, Councillor Heather Williams.
Really desperately not seeking to muddy the water at all, but I think many are more confused than when we started now. So I'm just going to ask if my understanding of what you've said is correct. That there is an SPD in place and policies for that site, of which this is not an application via it and therefore not compliant with that policy, but that policy is not in. Oh, I'm getting this very, very stern look from Rebecca now. There's more, but is that right in its first instance?
Do you want to go on?
In the first instance, so there is an SPD that has various policies in. One of the policies relates to you can demolish some eligible buildings and replace the same amount of footprint with a house. That policy, this one isn't compliant with, and they haven't applied under that policy. They've applied just for self-build outside the development framework as such.
So the fact that they haven't applied under that policy does not mean it's in conflict with that policy. It's just separate. So we're not in it's not a case of that policy says it can't happen. It's just they've not, because there's no building demolished.
There is an element there that means it can't happen, which is that they've already used the land that was available as an eligible building.
Yes, but Chair, my question is about the site and whether, because I think this is fair to ask questions on, because before we go further, because I can see nods, so I'm not alone. I will ask the stupid questions quite happily. So although it is not compliant in application of that policy does not prohibit, but it has to be taken in a different light. So we don't use the change of use of the buildings and existing footprints, but all other policies apply. Is that correct?
I will get up the policy S7. Yes, essentially. So we ignore policy H5, and then officers are essentially considering whether it complies with S7, which is essentially the main policy which we then consider. for any buildings outside the development framework. So there are no other local plan policies that support this development. So officers have then considered all the other considerations. So yes, you're right.
So we take it under its own light as any other application. That is simply a bit of a side bit. It's an application in its standard way, but we do need to bear in mind the SPD that's in place.
And also, but there is an element here that this is outside the development framework. So
I was going to say, just to add in, the reason why we're ignoring as such that policy is because they've already utilised the buildings on site already for that policy. So that's why we're saying.
We treat it as a standard application outside the development framework, but look at the other SPD policies. I think that is a bit clearer for us to understand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The point being is that they have already applied using the SPD remit, and they've used that and finished it. So now we're reverting to S7, the development framework, which is, and they're outside the development framework. So we have to think of this in terms of, is this an acceptable development outside the development framework?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and these are the issues that Tom Chenery has given us on page 47 of the agenda. So it's outside the development framework, it's within the Land Settlement Association estate, and it's a self-built dwelling application. So,
no other questions.
Sorry?
No other questions.
Oh, okay. Right, so we've sought clarification. So we then have the public speaker. So David Mead, the agent for the site, would you like to come and give your presentation? Thank you. So, Mr. Mead, you have 3 minutes, and we'll warn you at 2.5. Okay, so do go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, members, for the opportunity to speak this morning. I think that I'll just start with this issue about policy. I agree completely that the elements of the LSA and the replacement buildings is not how this has been applied for. It's purely a self-build. So I like to think about it as treating it the same as a Falmere application previously with regard to location outside the settlement framework, and then considering the character of the area in terms of both landscape and built environment, and then sustainability issues relating to the services available within the settlement, public transport links to the wider area, and the services available in Fen Stanton, which is actually closer to where this site is than the main part of Fen Drayton village. Fen Drayton itself, though, has similar amount of services to Falmere. To put it into context, school, pub, village hall, sports facilities, including tennis courts. There's a petrol filling station with associated shop very close to the application site. Fen Stanton itself also has a range of services, including butchers, cafes, pub, village hall, etc. And both Fen Stanton and the guided bus as well are within cycling distance of the application site. I'd like to talk about the character of the area, and I'm very glad that you went to made your site visit. And although the policy, the LSA policy with regard to replacement buildings and what we're trying to achieve in there is not directly relevant to this application, what that policy has created in terms of the character of the area is incredibly relevant. The application site has new residential development to the rear, to the side to the rear, to the other side to the rear. It has existing and more historic residential development on both sides of the application site. The density of development being proposed is similar to that's what's surrounding. We did have a previous application in for 3 dwellings originally, but we withdrew this because it was considered at the time by officers that was at too high a density for the application site, and we should be looking at fewer dwellings. So we came in with a scheme of 2. It's then slightly ironic that 2 is now considered not enough to be a gain in terms of delivering solutions for the shortfall of self-build dwellings in South Cowes, which is the main point of what we're trying to achieve with these self-build applications. And I'll just do finally with the biodiversity. I have offered the possibility of, because the applications, all matters are reserved, we don't have a firm plan. That comes later when the self-build people are involved. But effectively, I can't identify the BNG gains at this stage and should be dealt with as a condition, which is the whole point of BNG. But I'm happy to take that as a condition dealt with under reserved matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So, members, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Mears before he leaves? Mr. Mead before he leaves? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Hawkins was waving before me.
Okay. Councillor Hawkins,
No,
did you want to? Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Just on the ecology, we can see from our report on page 52, para 6.6, that it was asking for a metric to be submitted to prove some measurable gains. So you were saying that you, for yourself, Chair, that the applicant has no means at all to provide any ecology information at all about the site, because that's sort of what was implied, and I'm sure something could be provided rather than just nothing.
Yeah, I apologise, I wasn't clear. I was rushing a bit at the end with my 30-second warning. So I have supplied and submitted the metric for the site as existing. The baseline metric has been submitted and has been accepted by the ecology officer as accurate to what's on the site at the moment. What I haven't submitted is the proposed ecology, because I don't have a definitive scheme for the proposed ecology to be based on. I have offered to do a scheme based on the illustrative plan, but I haven't had a reply.
Okay, so it's because we cannot predict what might
Yes,
be
and
there,
all matters are reserved, so the illustrative plan is
working.
only illustrative, so it wasn't of any real
That's fine.
benefit.
Okay, thank you. Right. Can I just ask, is the intention to build to the quite demanding build standards that are in place under the SPD? I know it's not, you're not applying under that, but were you planning to build a very excellent, efficient dwelling? Two of them?
I think in the context of what's been developed in the area, that you have very little choice to do that, or you'd be the odd ones out. And so that sort of standard, and isn't far off modern building regs compared to what we were first looking at with the LSA all those years ago. But yes, absolutely the high standards.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've already got her on my list, thank you. Councillor Dr. Tim Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. You say you have given the BNG, whatever it is you call it. Sorry.
Metric.
Thank you, metric. That's what I was looking for. But what you haven't said is whether or not you will be able to actually meet the requirements to provide the BNG on the site, if for any reason you got planning permission. Are you able to? Will the site be able to provide the BNG that's required?
I can say from my experience in dealing with BNG, which is now, like all of us, is getting more and more and more, that with the size of the site and the very low baseline that's on the site at the moment, it should be comfortable to be able to achieve a net gain. We don't have to achieve 10% on this particular site. I think that's in the report, because it's actually pre-Environment Act, because it was submitted prior to April. So we have to achieve a net gain. But even if we had to do 10%, that would be able to deliver on this site.
So the point being, that is something that you would submit at reserved matters stage?
Correct, when we have the detailed design, the layout, and that would have to be designed to meet net gain, not the other way around. You wouldn't design it, then try and get it to work. You'd start with net gain.
Thank you very much. Okay, so no further questions for Mr. Mead. Thank you.
Chair, could we have an officer, and I think officers indicating a response in relation to this ecology point?
Certainly.
Just to clarify, the application was submitted in August
2024.
Yeah.
So it would require to meet the 10%. And just to make it clear that although a metric was submitted, the ecology officer was not content with the detail contained within that, given that we officers were refusing the application. Although a metric probably could have been submitted because that information wasn't acceptable at the time. Officers have continued with that reason for refusal. So I just want to make it clear that the metric was submitted, but it was considered unacceptable and did not provide the necessary information in order for an ecology officer to make a determination that they could then prove that they could then meet that 10% biodiversity net gain.
Okay, and Tom, could you clarify, please, whether it would, the 10% requirement would apply to it?
It would comply, yes.
It would
apply. It would apply, sorry.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Right. This is where I ask my question. In that, even if, for whatever reason, if we said, you know, the principle was okay, will that BNG be able to be provided on site? If not, but it sounds like even with the metric that was provided, the ecologist was not satisfied that it would meet that 10%.
Basically, there wasn't enough information within the metric for the ecology officer to then make an accurate determination as whether a condition could be applied in the future at any reserve matter stage, which would allow for the 10% to be met.
Okay. So as submitted, the information that was provided was insufficient for the officer to determine whether the BNG could be applied. Okay. Thank you. Yes, do.
Even if the 10% could not be met on site, the cascading principle could still be applied?
It could be done off-site, but once again, that's because it's all outlined with all matters reserved. That is a future thing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so were there any other questions of clarification? Right, okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Mead. Thank you for presenting to us. And we'll move on to Councillor Matthew Young, who's from Fen Drayton Parish Council, who I think is joining us online. Can I just check, Councillor Young, that you have the permission of your parish council to speak, the authority of your parish council to speak on this matter?
Yes, I do, and the words I'm going to read out come from the whole committee. They've reviewed those and agreed them.
I'm sorry, your audio is slightly blurry, if I may say. Can you just say that again? If you could just speak a little bit more slowly.
Yes, the words that I have to read out have been agreed by the committee, reviewed by them. So, and yes, I do have their permission to put these points. Can you hear me okay now?
Thank you. That's easier to hear you now. Thank you so much. Right. So you've got 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you're at 2.5. Thank you. Do go ahead.
So this is the response to the application from Fen Drayton Parish Council. The council strongly objects to the outline planning permission for these two self-built houses on land at 50 Middleton Way. The site's within the historic former Fen Drayton Land Settlement Association estate, located outside of the development framework boundary of Fen Drayton in an area considered to be open countryside. This speculative application is contrary to the adopted South Cambridgeshire Local Plan 2018, in particular policies S7 and H5. It's also contrary to the adopted Fen Drayton Former Land Settlement Association supplementary planning document, which specifically covers this location. The proposal claims immunity from constraints imposed by the local plan, policies and Fen Drayton SPD on the basis of the Self-Build and Custom House Building Act 2015. Approving the development on this basis sets a precedent for planning approvals anywhere in the parish. This use of self-build legislation, if allowed, leaves the locality vulnerable to property developers gaining approvals for sites with multiple houses, none of which they intend to self-build or occupy themselves, as a way of bypassing planning rules. When district-wide policies in the local plan are applied, then due regard should be given to the SPD relating to Fen Drayton land, whereby houses can only be built if there's an eligible building footprint, for instance, the old piggeries, which this application doesn't have. At the end of January 2024, this specific issue was raised at a meeting of the Parish Council and the Greater Cambridge Partnership relating to a planning application for a house in the garden of 29 Coots Lane, Fen Drayton. At that point, GCP stated that new houses built in the gardens of former LSA land areas where no footprint is available would be rejected unless the house was on a main road such as Coots Lane. Middleton Way is a narrow private road. The houses built under 2011 Fen Drayton SPD, by their nature, all have large plots. Approving this application raises the prospect that many new 4 and 5 bedroom houses will be built on many of the LSA plots with no overall plan and no benefit to the village. The parish council is not against developments in keeping with and to the benefit of the overall village, such as the building of smaller affordable houses like the development of 14 houses next to the village hall. These developments enable people who wish to live in the village and can't afford the prices of big houses. It also benefits the village with S106 money to improve the village's facilities. The development of these 2 further dwellings in this location, along with the precedent that this sets, will significantly harm the specific rural character of this area of countryside. Through scale, location and massing, they would represent a significant urbanisation of this part of the LSA land. Fen Drayton Parish Council requests that the GCP rejects the application and confirms that all similar applications will be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Young. That's helpful. Does anybody have any questions of clarification for Mr. Young? Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Young, for your presentation on behalf of the Parish Council. I presume that you have heard the question of clarifications that we asked regarding the policies S7 and H5. Does any of that actually answer any of the concerns that the Parish Council has raised regarding those particular policies?
No, I have to apologise. So I only recently joined the Parish Council. I'm not very expert in these areas. I think the main concern is that because of the nature of the SPD that covers Fen Drayton, there are a lot of houses with large gardens, and that building in gardens under the self-build legislation will affect very widely a large area of countryside around about the village, and it's the precedent. Because this is outline, as has been already said, it's very hard to comment on the nature of the actual building, but the precedent that's set by the Outline Planning Commission would have a very high impact on the whole area. So we're looking at the principle of it. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
If I may come back, please, Chair.
You go ahead.
So effectively, I think I hear you. It's more the effect on the character of the settlement that is of concern, because of the fact that this proposal doesn't follow what is in the rest of the settlement area. Am I correct?
That's correct. And the settlement's not against building per se. We're against the particular precedent that this sets and how that will impact the whole of the area around the village.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, we're not GCP. GCP is the Greater Cambridge Partnership. We're Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service.
Yes,
thank you for your presentation.
put that down to my ignorance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Young. Okay, thank you. And so, members, if there are no further questions for Mr. Young, actually, I just want to, if I can, Mr. Young, if you're still there, sorry, I just will ask you one question, if you're still there. Thank you. Our report tells us that it is approximately 1.2 kilometres from the proposed site to Fen Drayton. But I imagine that's a very rural, it's an unmade road, is it not? It doesn't have street lighting.
No.
And there aren't very many facilities in Fen Drayton.
There's no shop, there's no pavement along along Middleton. It's just a narrow private road. You need to pull into someone's drive typically to let a car coming the other way pass. And there is a shop at the Shell station going the other way, but walking there is dangerous because there's no pavement, and it's the feed road that leads onto 1307. There was a fatality motor accident there about a year ago. It's a fast entry slip road onto the 1307, which is a dual carriageway. So you'd want to be a bit careful walking to that.
Right, thank you. So, members, we move into debate. Would anybody like to... I'll start, since I was at the site visit and nobody else has indicated. So, this is quite tricky in view of the appearance of development around this site. What concerns me more than anything, I think, about this application is the isolation of it from rural community activities. You know, there is a primary school in Fen Drayton, but as Mr. Young has told us, you know, there's not very much else there apart from a shop and sorry, I'm not even sure there is a shop, actually, sorry. But it's a very isolated location with no footway along Middleton Road, which would join up with Cootes Road, which is the road across the top, which would then lead across to Fen Drayton. So if children were to be brought up in these houses, there would only be these very remote roads to be on, which might be quieter for some reasons, but I think there's a concern amongst the parish council that if the guidance that applies in terms of the supplementary planning document and the Land Settlement Association arrangements, if that is cut across in the way of allowing this through self-build, then this will set a precedent for elsewhere. Mr. Young pointed out that there are other properties in Fen Drayton that have very large gardens, and this could set a precedent for those too. So I'm not feeling very enthused towards this application, but I appreciate we have the self-build register as well, but I'm concerned about this being such an isolated location. So, Dr. Timmy Hawkins, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Definitely there's a challenge here. The location itself, as you've rightly pointed out, is isolated. There is a settlement plan there, and I know we've had something similar before. Abingdon, something like that. Anyway.
Yes, there's another settlement association at Great Abingdon.
Yeah, correct. And what we do try and do is keep the character of these areas, which is important because that's the historical heritage of those types of settlements. And from what I have heard and read, the opportunity to use the H5 has already been taken. This is outside of that. The fact that it's not in a sustainable location, it's going to seriously affect the character of the settlement, I think, in my view, does weigh against the benefit of it being self-built. Yeah, I think I'm tending towards it's not the right place for the self-build. It's still a balance. I'll hear what everybody else has to say.
I think Councillor Harvey was displaying his hand before me, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just, it seems unusual for this for a case to come to the committee when one of the considerations is that we don't actually have an answer to one of the questions we might expect to have because we don't have the information provided by Biodiversity Net Gain, basically isn't there. So that it seems a bit odd if one of the material considerations is that, because if we were to approve, would we be approving further applications coming forward without full information being there. So, but that's just one point. But it does seem to me that this would be setting a precedent, and the location does seem to be unsustainable. So I'm sort of, for both those reasons, feeling that I would feel very nervous approving this for both those reasons.
So, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just mindful as well with our language that we have an obligation to be consistent, but precedent and planning, do not mix. I think this, every application is very different, but what we saw previously on the site of the village framework as well, so an extension of the village, as opposed to this, which is a very isolated place. So I think the sustainability in this is a far greater issue, and it isn't compliant with policy. We look at where there can be exceptions. It's not an exception site. So the only thing is it provides 2 self-build. I don't believe that 2 more units dramatically changes the situation in regards to self-build provision. I appreciate, you have a little bit, but for me, the reasons for refusal and the benefit when we're balancing it for 2 units is just not there. I think that the sustainability issue is far greater than 2 units. And also, we have the ecology situation. For me, the sustainability is the main thing. The ecology, it sounds like that's a lack of information. So we don't know, it could or it could not. The issue is the applicant has failed to provide the right evidence bar. But for sustainability, where it is, I think is grounds enough for refusal, and so I would be supportive of the officer recommendation, Chair.
Can't see anybody else indicating to speak. Would you like to speak, Peter? Councillor Fane, sorry.
And we also have Councillor Sanford after that. Yes, I'll go first then, if I may. Yes, we've got 3 main factors to consider here. We know about the weight to be given to self-built dwellings. That is plenty of guidance on that in appeal findings and so on. So I want to just deal briefly with the 2 material considerations given here for refusal. Firstly, the evidence of how biodiversity net gain will be provided. I think the applicant made a very good point that in relation to self-built dwellings, we can only really look at the potential to deliver biodiversity net gain on site, or indeed it could be done off site, because inevitably, with custom build or self-build, the details will have to be considered at reserve matter stage. We're looking at an outline application. So it is perfectly possible that that could be met at that stage. On the unsustainable location, I wonder if you could just go back for a moment to the location plan. I meant the 2 forward, if you would. There we are. I mean, as we can see there, the site is immediately adjacent to the back of what my investigation suggested to be a garage with a shop, if that is correct. That would be helpful if the planning officer would clarify.
So there is, as the David indicated, there is a petrol station. Let me just bear with me while I get my pointer up. So there is a petrol station. I think Matthew Young, the parish council, has indicated it's off the screen, but it's round here somewhere. It is a short distance, but shorter distance. Sorry, I should make it clear. However, people would still have to go along unlit roads in order to get there, and obviously, as the parish council indicated, this is the road you would have to cross is the slip road onto the A1307. So it's not it's not a slow road. So yes, although there is a shop in close proximity, we also have had other appeals that indicate that petrol stations do not provide the level of services that people would need because it's simply a petrol station and doesn't provide much more than that.
So if I may, going back to my point about the unsustainable location, the fact is that although neighbouring properties have been built under separate provisions not applicable here, the site is surrounded by development. We're not going to count the shop in the petrol station, and therefore I think the question reasonably arrives is as to what extent this is truly an unsustainable location. I think for this purpose we have to assume that it is. Going back to the balance, I'm very inclined to say that the weight we have to give to self-built and custom-built houses, which can't always be met by larger numbers, is quite substantial. I am not really persuaded of the problems over biodiversity net gain because I think that has to be addressed at a later stage in custom build. So I'm very inclined to say that we should grant this application. However, I do take full account of the opposition of the parish council, and they've obviously considered this in great detail, including the points that I've referred to. They've asked us, incidentally, to commit to applying a similar approach in future applications, and it will be obvious that we can't do any such thing. We're considering only this application. So for me, it is still in the balance as to whether we grant this, and I'm inclined to say we should do so against the officer recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Sandford.
Thank you, Chair. Just to harp on about the unsustainable nature of the site. It isn't entirely clear from the pictures, but Middleton Lane is very narrow. When we did our site visit, we had to scramble onto the verge to avoid an oncoming car. And it's not going to be practical for anyone to walk their child or even cycle to the local primary school in Fen Drayton along that road. Likewise, I think a reference was made to cycling into Fen Stanton. I don't recall seeing a cycle path, and as noted, that's a fairly fast road. So by default, and I think Mr. Young, or Councillor Young rather, implied this site can only be serviced by a car or cars. It's probably going to put 3 or 4 more cars on the road in this location, which, as the road is pretty rough already, is not ideal. So I think I'm tending to support the officers on this one.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Councillor Heather Williams.
Chair, I think it might be helpful for all of us, just because there have been expressions of potential support as well as refusal with the officer recommendation, to just have outlined the process to ensure that conditions were put in place.
Thank you. So, just to remind members, if as we go forward we take a vote on the officer recommendation, the officer recommendation is to refuse. So if we support that, we refuse the application. But if we vote, if members are minded to vote against that application, we would then need to seek a motion. If we'd objected to the refusal, we would then need to seek a further proposal and a seconder for another recommendation. And we'll come to that if we get to that point. Hope you understand that. Thank you. Right, so I don't think anybody else is wishing to speak. So I propose we take a vote. Sorry? Yes, sorry. Yes, so the officer recommendation is at paragraph 11 on page 64, and Rebecca will read us through it.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to clarify that the officer recommendation, as you've set out, is on page 64, 65 of your agenda. Officer recommendation is to refuse. There's 2 reasons set out relating to the siting outside the defined development framework, and also lack of information essentially relating to biodiversity. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so would anybody like to propose that recommendation to refuse? So Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins is proposing, and I'll second that. So, members, let's take a vote on this application then. If you wish, now, just be careful, members, if you wish to support this recommendation of refusal, you vote yes, green. If you do not, if you want to do the opposite, you would have to vote red at this point, and let's go to a vote. So there are still 11 of us. Here we are. Okay. So in fact, members, that's unanimously in favour of refusal of the application. Thank you very much. Members, would you like to crack on, or would you like a break? Yep, let's have a break for a pause. So can I suggest we have 10 minutes? Okay, so thank you, members. We're back live again after a short break, during which we have read an additional document which has been submitted regarding the planning application. And I'm going to hand over to Vanessa, who is our legal advisor.
Thank you for taking the time to read that email, members. It was given to you, it was came to our attention this morning that it had been sent to ward members with a request that it was forwarded to planning committee members, so obviously you all needed to see it. You will see at the bottom that it does have an address on. I would ask you to destroy copies before you leave today, or give them to us to recycle. It will be going on the planning portal once it's redacted, so it will be there for everyone to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so members, thank you for taking the time to read that. And we'll start off with Melissa Reynolds, who's the case officer, giving us a presentation. Sorry, I'll just go through this item. It's Impington Village College, and its installation of footlights to netball courts and construction of acoustic timber fencing. And members attended a site visit on the 4th of December. So thank you, Melissa. Would you like to take us through?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just trying to change my pointer so you can actually see it a bit better. Bear with me a second. Okay, we'll have to manage without. Apologies. So this application is for a site at Impington Village College Sports Centre. There is already a number of netball courts on the site. They will be resurfaced separately. The application seeks permission for the installation of floodlights to those courts and an acoustic fence. Following the Chair's update at the beginning, you've all now had the opportunity to read the late objection that's been received, and just to reassure members that officers are satisfied that those matters are already covered in the committee report. Also, we had a bit of discussion about condition 6, which recommends a traffic management plan, and we'd like to update that recommendation to include that liaison with the parish and locals is included as a requirement of that condition, to ensure that local residents have the opportunity to have some input into that, given the serious issues of concern around traffic and parking in the area. So I'll move on. This is the site. Those of you that know the Village College, there's an access off of here from New Road. This is Park Drive along here. You have residential properties south of that road. There's an area of temporary car parking that was put in when the Cavendish School, which is a special educational school here, that was constructed and opened in 2020. The remainder of the campus is over here with its sports fields around here. The actual building itself, the main Village College building, is Grade 1 listed. And yeah, you've got New Road, sorry, and various other residential streets off of here. The site is in the green belt. It's also outside of the village framework. There are TPO trees within the wider site, primarily along the New Road frontage. Yeah, so in terms of constraints, that's that. This is a zoomed in image of the site as it is at the moment. You've got the car park that serves the sports centre over here in this area, and you've got the Scout Hut here. There's various hard pavings north of the courts where there's cycle parking. One of the main issues that has come up during representations and the consideration of application is there's a mature Leylandi hedge along this side of the netball courts, which would need to be removed. There's also a group of trees on this corner which wouldn't be affected, but the landscaping and BNG does propose some additional planting underneath to secure the BNG required as a result of the proposals. This is the proposed layout. So this line here is the line of the noise fence, the acoustic screen. It doesn't go all the way along because the residential properties are here and it's intended to provide screening to those properties. Along each edge you've got 5 lights, 10 in total, that 8 metres in height. The submitted lighting scheme shows that these will have baffles on so that the light spread doesn't go backwards, it's just going into the courts. And this is an image of what the acoustic fence would look like. So it's quite high, it's 3 metres high, solid timber boarding as required to provide the necessary acoustic attenuation for the residential properties. I've referred to the light spill design. I've included this just because A, it's an aerial photograph and it helps members to see the site in context for those that weren't able to visit the site last week. The residential properties are here, so there is a little bit of a separation anyway, and this is the kind of the hedge, but it's hard to see on this plan, but this is a lot of zeros from basically beyond that line here.
Are those little white dots zeros?
Yes.
Saying there will be no light
Yes,
village.
it's
here.
quite hard. It's impossible to see on this plan, so I apologise, but you get the idea.
Can I just ask, where on that plan is it? Because they appear to be on the. Can you do it? As
Tried. I don't. We can try.
Stop sharing.
Sorry, a second.
Stop presenting. Share your screen instead. Which window is it? There we go.
Yeah. Pointer options. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So. Sorry.
What is this actually showing us?
So this is the plan that was submitted showing the light spill specifically. So you've got the courts here and the light spill beyond that area. So like just where my cursor is, it goes down to nothing. So the residential properties don't have any light spill in this direction. It's all going this way towards the courts. Okay. Is that okay?
What you can't see on the screen potentially is because it's not zoomed in, is there are actually numbers on the court to show that that's where the light is. And then those numbers disappear down to 0 as you move towards the south, towards the residential properties.
Thank you, Rebecca. I mentioned there is a soft landscaping and BNG plan. The application proposes to remove the large conifer hedge that's there on the site at the moment. There is room to provide some replacement planting, which would go along here, along with the acoustic fence. The trees that are already there would be retained, and there's an opportunity there to put some bird boxes in and some shrub planting. We have had comments from the landscape officer about the suitability of this particular species proposed, but the principle that there is room there for some landscaping to go in to replace the hedge, we're satisfied that can be achieved. So I think I've mentioned everything here, other than it's in flood zone 1 and it's countryside. There was a previous application that was approved in 2020, which has lapsed due to COVID and them not having the opportunity subsequently to be able to implement this. And there was an earlier application last year that was withdrawn so that the applicant could address some concerns that arose. There is also a live application that's separate to this one for the wider site for a 3G pitch and some associated development. But but we're trying to keep the two separate because they are different matters. Provided some photos for members that weren't able to visit the site. So this is looking from the sort of New Road direction up Park Drive. These are the conifer trees along here. These are the trees on the corner. This is the footpath. So the new replacement landscaping would be going along this edge of the pavement. You can just make out here that I've got some better pictures, but the residential dwellings are over here and the netball courts are in here. This is the car park. So here you can see the residential properties on site. They've been there a long time. They're, I think, built as part of the campus early on.
We're losing you, Melissa. Do
Oh,
speak
sorry.
up. That's
Sorry.
okay. Don't worry.
Trying to rattle through it. This is from the Cavendish School entrance, looking towards across the pitches. So you've got the college over here and the sports centre here, and these are school buildings. You can just make out here the temporary car park, and this is the conifer hedge. I think this might be the last one, and this is a view further back, so you can see the hedge and the pitches in the wider context from the New Road entrance. Officers are recommending approval. There were a lot of representations, fairly equally for and against. In planning terms, we've taken into consideration the fact that there is a previous permission that established the principle as being acceptable. It supports active lifestyles, and the fact that harm can be mitigated through planning conditions, particularly the hours restriction, that the hours that the lights can operate, BNG and traffic management plan as previously mentioned. In terms of issues, there are obviously some issues that have arisen from this in terms of traffic and parking, noise and lighting, that impact neighbour amenity, the loss of the trees, and the change in circumstances since the original application was approved with the opening of the Cavendish School and the adoption of the neighbourhood plan. We're satisfied that those material changes don't tip the balance towards a refusal and a recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just ask some questions I wanted to just check with you? There is it doesn't say in the report, but I had assumed part of the reason for removing the Leylandii trees was because their roots were causing problems for the netball court. In other words, lifting the tarmac. However, I couldn't see that when we were on site. I couldn't see any evidence that the Leylandii trees had lifted the netball court at all and made the surface uneven. And indeed, in your drawings, the drawings that have been submitted, there's an indication that they might replant trees outside the acoustic fence once it's been installed. Can you just clarify whether tree roots have been a problem with the netball court or not?
The representations we've received from Sport England and from the, well, it's listed as Girton Netball Club and the college, but I'm led to believe by our sports officer it is actually a representation from Histon Netball Club. They have indicated that the courts haven't been usable for tournaments and matches for quite some time because of issues from the tree roots and shading, which has caused I wouldn't say moss, but it's got a green. You can see there's greenery growing over the surface, which makes it slippy and uneven. As I mentioned right at the start, the actual resurfacing isn't part of the application. They don't need planning permission for that.
No.
They will be resurfacing the courts, but that's a separate issue for the college. Our understanding is the trees are required to be removed to facilitate the works that generally are proposed and to avoid the issues of the courts once the surface is replaced from recurring. The college has said that if necessary, in order to address the parish council's concerns, that they would be willing to keep the conifer hedge. But I think as officers we feel that it would be better to remove it and avoid the issue in the future and to then allow the replacement planting, which aesthetically is probably more suitable in terms of looks and biodiversity, and would provide some green screening to the acoustic fence. Does that help?
Yes, do you want to come in, Rebecca?
Yeah, can I just clarify that the removal of the trees also isn't necessarily part of the application because it doesn't require consent, so that's not necessarily something that we need to consider.
No, but the point was that the argument had been made that the trees affected the netball court, and my observation was that it was green and algae, but that would still be the case if there was a fence there, because it would still be shaded, perhaps, I don't know. And so I just wanted to check whether roots were a problem, and thus whether the trees that are proposed to be planted under this drawing would make a difference. Can I also ask, and it might be more appropriate to ask the applicant from IVC, do let me know, presumably the section on the eastern end where there are no Leylandii, and it's where the cycle racks are, I'm just wondering, were Leylandii trees removed from there in order to install cycle racks in a previous
I'm afraid I don't know.
arrangement? It looks like that might have happened, but I don't know. Okay.
Just to clarify, they don't need permission to remove the trees.
No,
so
I'm not disputing that. That's fine. It's just, I wondered whether the trees had originally gone all the way along and then they removed them to put the cycle racks in. It's just a thought. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to ask in relation to Greenbelt, because when we look at page 68, 2.1, it says the site is outside the development framework in the countryside and is designated Cambridge Greenbelt land. And yet when we have the key issues, Greenbelt isn't listed. Now, normally if something's Greenbelt, then we take the time to debate the circumstances and have that as quite a key component. So I'm just wondering if there is a reason why that isn't included, and if possible, if we can see sort of where the Greenbelt lines are.
Mm-hmm. So the Greenbelt is covered in the Planning Committee report under Principle of Development. In terms of Greenbelt, development is for outside sport is acceptable in principle. It's not considered to be inappropriate development because it retains the openness and is necessary to be in the countryside.
Perhaps I haven't been clear enough in my questioning for the officer. That might be part of it, but normally we have to go through a process of test on Greenbelt. And when I look at the scale of your planning balance and on the cover note, when it referenced key issues, that I appreciate what you're saying in your summary, but normally we would need to go through and as a committee and so because we have to accept it is harm, and it's whether it's whether it outweighs etc. as part of the Greenbelt test. I appreciate you've put a summary, but it's not in the it's not on your balance at all.
In the paragraph 10.5 to 10.14 in the report, but
I
we
have
can
said
certainly
it's
have a
in,
look at the map.
It's in the
That would be
report,
helpful.
but on the scales that we were shown, Chair,
Okay.
it wasn't a consideration. And I do think that's an important part of the process that committee should be going through. It's a key issue, and it is not listed as a key issue.
I understand what you're saying. So, do you have a map of the Greenbelt that shows the extent?
I don't, but the entire site is in the Greenbelt. The Greenbelt boundary follows the new road frontage. It's not listed as a key issue because it's acceptable in principle, and it's an executive summary to try and draw members' attention to the issues that officers have considered to be of concern. We've already established the principle through the previous planning permission. So the front page summarises those key issues as traffic, highway safety and car parking, noise and light disturbance in terms of amenity to neighbours, and the impact on the built and natural environment in terms of listed building, ecology and trees. It is covered quite in some detail actually in the committee report.
Just one other thing is that the thing that has been discussed in the past in the Greenbelt is floodlights. And I'm just slightly concerned about that, because do they not have a particular impact on the Greenbelt?
They can do in terms of, it is development, but the MPPF states quite clearly in our own local plan policies that sports development is acceptable in principle. And also, I do just draw members' attention to the fact that we've agreed the principle of this previously. So if we were to turn around now and say it's not acceptable in principle in Greenbelt terms, it would put into question perhaps our previous decision making. But
no, it's okay. That's fine. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Williams?
It gives a reason for why it hasn't been put in the officer's report as a key material. I would suggest, though, that it's something that as committee we ensure that we do discuss in our debate.
I'm sure we will. Has anybody else got any other questions of clarification for the case officer? Yes, Councillor Dr. Tim Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I guess it's still, for me, the first one was the Leyland trees. I know they don't require permission to remove them, but this trees currently provide screening. And whilst they propose to potentially put new planting, that will take time to establish. So I'm still not sure why they feel it necessary to remove those trees. But part of the response that's been given to you and previous question was they could potentially retain them. Did I hear that correctly?
You did. Had you finished?
And the second point I was going to make was, why is the acoustic fence stopped just short of the end of that southern boundary rather than all the way through? Of course, noise does go around corners.
I think we were given the reason as that it was stopped parallel with the end of the building line, where the house.
I'm sorry, Chair, but noise goes round corners.
Yes, I hear what you're saying.
And as far as I can see, those houses will still be open to noise effect.
Melissa, can you talk to us about the fact that trees provide screening and whether it's necessary to remove them? Sorry, did you want to go?
Sorry, there was a third one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
The lighting, is it all, I mean, it's 8 meters, 8-meter poles, whereas the fence is 3 meters.
Yeah.
Now, obviously the concern has been expressed is the spill of the light. So how is the lighting being provided? Is it going to be down lights, or do we have any configuration of what they actually look like?
But perhaps you can talk to us. So that's 3 things then: the screening, which even if replanted would take time to grow. Why is the acoustic fence stopped at the eastern end? And lighting, 8-meter poles, 3-meter fence. The difference between the two, and is it baffled? I mean, we've been advised that it is, but do go ahead.
So in terms of the Leyland hedge, as I think we've already said, there's nothing stopping the college from taking it out. The applicant has proposed replacement planting to provide a softening of that visually and to provide some BNG. I don't think there's really much more we can say about that because it is what it is. I mean, it has been there for 40 years, and it is quite a substantial hedge as well. And any replacement planting clearly isn't going to replace that from day one, but as with all planning conditions, it would be required to be maintained and any plants that fail replaced. I don't know the answer in terms of why it hasn't been carried on the full length. All I can tell you is that that's what they've proposed, and our environmental health officers have confirmed that they are satisfied it would protect the neighbouring properties' amenities in terms of noise. In terms of the lighting poles, the lighting report does state that they will be baffled, so effectively the light is prevented from going backwards, it's just projected forward onto the courts. And the details of that are in the submitted lighting statement. So we've got those details. Our environmental health officers have seen those and are also satisfied.
If I could just clarify as well, the reason that the Leylandi trees are being removed is so that you can put the acoustic fence in. They wouldn't be able to do both. So the acoustic fence is replacing the Leylandi screening that's there at present.
Can I just ask, because I also had a query about the height of the acoustic fence versus the height of the lighting poles. And, you know, it's my observation that sound moves radially out from point sources, and sound can also go upwards. And it just occurred to me, why aren't they making the acoustic fence taller to match the screening that's being provided currently by the trees? Because we've got a 3 metre fence, 8 metre poles, so that's 5 metres of gap above the top of the acoustic fence. And it just seemed a bit unhelpful, given that there had been screening before. Has there been any discussion of that?
We have to assess the application that's submitted and is in front of us. This is the application that's submitted. Environmental health colleagues have been consulted and advised that it's sufficient screening for acoustic screening. And the same with the lighting. It's acceptable, it won't have a harmful impact on residential amenity.
I suppose the principle is that the floodlighting will light the sky above the netball court. So there will be an area of sky that's light, but it won't be shining into people's gardens or whatever. It won't be shining into people's bedrooms, etc., that sort of thing. Okay, any other questions for clarification? Thank you, Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 2 points, but my first one was to pick up on that point, actually, because we were shown a map with those little zeros and ones, which I could just about see. And I think that was presented to us as showing that there'd be no, light intrusion. But I'll be honest, I find that very difficult to accept. I mean, I've never been anywhere near a floodlit pitch that isn't visible from quite a distance away, because light, like sound, scatters. It might be directed down, it hits the floor, it scatters. So I find it difficult to believe that where all those zeros, there's not going to be any light pollution at all. It just seems, So really my question is, what is that actually telling us? What do those zeros mean? Because you're not going to be standing in complete pitch darkness on that green grass where there's a zero, and then, 3 meters away there's a massively floodlit pitch. So what does that actually mean? What is that telling us? And the other, it was a small point, but and maybe a tangential point, but there was reference to a 3G pitch. I don't know what a 3G pitch is. So I was wondering if we could get clarification on what a 3G pitch is.
Can I ask to add to Councillor Dr. Williams's query, is there a principle that being able to see a lit location is different to having light directed at you? Is that the principle under which this is being, is saying that there wouldn't be a light spillage?
I'll start and Mel might want to jump in. So in terms of the light spillage results, as we've explained, the lights are baffled, so the lights won't shine backwards, they're shining down and onto the court. That's what the floodlights are for, so that you can play sport on the court. So you will be able to see the light, because in terms of being able to see the sports pitch being lit, but there won't be light spillage backwards. They will be directed down towards the court, and will be baffled from, or stopped from, spilling backwards towards the residential properties. So hopefully that's what the zeros mean. There'll be zero light spillage from those lights behind them. The lights will all be directed down and towards the sports pitch. A 3G pitch is a type of AstroTurf. It does hurt when you fall on it. Burns your knees.
And I had a further question with regard to sports pitches in general, and that is, what is a normal stretch of hours for lighting to be turned on when it's relatively close to residential premises? I appreciate we've been assured there will be no light spillage, but there's all the activity of people leaving a court, talking, chatting, banging car doors, that sort of thing. I just wondered, what is normal for a pitch? Because this goes up until 10 o'clock Monday to Saturday, I think, isn't it?
I don't think we can define what's normal, unfortunately.
So we
It's
can
all
determine
dependent upon circumstances. At the minute, I believe there is unrestricted hours of use on these courts. But I guess the floodlights will allow them to be used later into the evening than they are at present. Sport England have commented on the proposal in terms of the hours of lighting, and on that basis we've recommended the conditions, and they're also similar conditions to that on the previous permission for floodlighting on this site. I think Mel wants to jump in.
Oh, yeah,
before.
sorry. Yep.
Sport England recommended its own standard condition in terms of hours, which was slightly different to the hours that the parish council had asked for, and slightly less than the college had requested. So there is a bit of a balance to be made between that. But what's in there, from my memory, was what the Sport England condition recommended. So I would say, if you're looking for a standard, that would be where I would start.
So the condition that we've got at condition 5 for hours talks about 8 to 10 o'clock Monday to Friday, 8 to 7 on a Saturday, and 9 to 8 p.m. on Sunday. And I think the parish council had requested that instead of the Monday to Friday, 8 to 10, it should be 8 to 8. I think that was what I saw in the report, maybe. So no average, but we can make suggestions as we wish, if members want something different to that. So, who else wished to speak? Councillor Lisa Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions, if that's all right. One was about the point from the county transport team, which said that they requested that the school addresses tax. Oh, sorry, where am I? Has requested further information on the layout of the car park for the 3G pitch, and also requested information on the car park capacity on evenings and weekends to allow them to work out what excess was available. I just wondered if that had happened and if we had any information on that. I was thinking about if we've got 4 courts for netball with 7 players a team, that could potentially be 56 players if all courts were used, and we don't know anything about how likely that is. But if 56 people came independently, that would be a huge impact. So you can kind of perhaps, if that's what residents are worrying about, I could perhaps see why that would be a concern, because the car park in the red line area isn't of that capacity. The other question is that there are some points from the conservation officer about the setting of heritage assets and the Leylandii hedge impacting that, and needing a condition for substitute planting to offset that. I just wondered if the planting in the plans is considered okay by the conservation officer, and also if it's possible just to point out where the heritage assets are, because I'm not sure of that.
It's the college building itself.
There was something about a gate as well.
Yeah, the gate is as you proceed through from New Road. Yeah. Do you want to speak, Melissa?
I'll go first. I'll take the car parking. Melissa can take the heritage. So in terms of the car parking, we have 2 applications on the site. So this application relates to just the netball courts, floodlights for the netball courts and the acoustic fence. The other application relates to the 3G pitch and regularising car parking across the whole site. However, given the change in circumstance in extending the usable hours for the netball court compared to what there is there at present by the introduction of the lighting columns, we have recommended condition 6, which the use of the courts shan't commence until a traffic and car park management plan has been submitted and approved, which we recommended an amendment to that's in consultation with the parish and local residents. Before the courts can be used, because we acknowledge that the extended hours of use of the courts by installation of the floodlights could facilitate additional movement for the car park to what there is at the current situation. So we have recommended a condition of requiring that information and requiring it to be approved by the transport assessment team before obviously the use of the courts commence. The wider car parking and transport assessment for the site as a whole forms part of the other application, which should come to committee in the new year.
Okay, and the heritage matter?
Yeah, thank you. So, sorry, it's gone back to the normal cursor, but I'm just going to move it around in the hope that you can see that. It's this building over here. It's the original college, which is built on a sort of, let me see if I can, there you go. Put into options. There you go. Oh, that's better. Thank you, Rebecca. So this is the listed building, grade 1 listed. I was personally concerned to make sure that there wasn't going to be an impact in terms of use free, because there is a bit of a gap here through the playgrounds, and the conservation officer has considered that and accepted that there won't be views between the buildings. So in terms of the setting of that listed building, it's acceptable. In terms of your question about the substitute planting, we don't actually have a landscaping condition in the recommendation. So that may be something members would like officers to add in terms of securing an actual landscaping scheme. We've got the BNG condition, but they're not quite the same. Oh, Rebecca. Oh, condition 8.
Which is on page 92.
It says this plan should include trees that are appropriate to setting adjacent to the courts and a footpath. So there is scope in that condition for us to actually require appropriate trees. Thank you, Rebecca. I'd forgotten we changed that. Does that answer the question? Thank you.
Do come back, Councillor Redrup.
Thank you both for those answers. I think I'm solved on the heritage, and if I can come back on the traffic management. So could that plan include things like only allowing netball matches on a certain number of courts at a time, or something like that? Or is there scope to have a comeback if there are problems caused by it? I think previously with traffic management plans we've had like a chance for people to raise complaints and then perhaps it to be reconsidered if what's been put in place isn't working. Thank you.
Yes, and indeed I think that's a very good suggestion, because we on the site visit attended about 2:30 in the afternoon, and by the time we'd finished the site visit, not only was, well, when we arrived, all the parking that was on what was previously grass outside Park Road houses was filled with cars, but also by the time we left, there were taxis queuing up to pick up children from the Cavendish School, which, as you know, is a special needs school and requires taxi transport for many of the youngsters who attend. The other thing which has been raised, indeed in the report and in the email that we read before we started looking at this, is given that these netball courts aren't being used for competitive purposes, if you do suddenly start to have competitive play, then you are going to get more than one team arriving at a time. And you helpfully pointed out how many it could be up to 56 people arriving individually if there was going to be a tournament on, which is an enormous amount of traffic. And to my view, and I know this is part of the other application, but to my view, the traffic management has not been handled well on the site up to now, and clearly not with the local residents. So can we put anything stronger in there? Because as part of that separate application, is there provision for additional parking somewhere on the site?
That's a separate application, so it's not under consideration today. Today we are purely looking at the floodlights and the acoustic fencing.
Yes, but if it made the difference between this being refused because we didn't think there was enough enough parking for the netball purposes that they want to make this suitable for, then that might be a different thing, mightn't it?
But the netball purpose, sorry to interrupt, the netball use already exists. So that use exists and is currently unrestricted. So this relates to floodlighting and relates to the acoustic fence only. So as part of that, we have suggested a condition relating to a car park management plan because obviously the use will be extended in terms of the hours that it can be used. But as you've said, 56 people could turn up today. And at the minute, that's but that's... If you let me finish, sorry. At the minute, that's part of the use that already exists. The use isn't being applied for. The use exists. So this is purely relating to the acoustic fence and the lighting. As part of the lighting extending the hours of use, we're able to ask for a car park management plan. We've already suggested one amendment to that in terms of consultation with local residents. We can put in another amendment which we have used in the past, which gives a mechanism to review that at a later date, and we have put that in other conditions previously in terms of whether or not the management plan is being operated as best possible or whether it's fit for purpose. So we could put that in, and we have done that on other commercial applications. But just trying to draw you back to actually this application relates to floodlights and an acoustic fence.
Yes, but the addition of floodlights enables the use of the netball court, A, at different hours than it currently is, and B, in a different way because it's currently not acceptable for competitive standard play, which it would become if they floodlit it. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I think it would be a very good idea to add a review at a later date if members agree that, so that if the car park management plan is not proving satisfactory, it can be reviewed.
Sorry, Councillor Williams, just to come back. The floodlighting doesn't enable the competitive play. The floodlighting enables the evening use.
Yes.
The competitive play could happen without this application.
Except that they're saying that the surface isn't up to the standard.
The surface isn't part of this application.
Okay, righto. Okay, so Councillor Williams.
I do have a couple of questions to report, but I'd also like to point out that the lights only help in winter. Essentially, they can still do the same in summer. You've got the same problems because the light goes longer, but I do think we should steer to the lights and the sound barriers. As you say, the pitch feels a bit of a decoy. My question was around the third-party representations. It says on paragraph 7.1 that there are 64 objections and 53 in support, and then goes on to say, in some cases, multiple representations have been received. So I'm just trying to, is that because it's a standard, like a standard letter when you say that about multiple representations, or is that somebody sat there and the same person has done it 12 times? And if so, if we were to take, if that is multiple people, if we were to take those out, what do the numbers look like?
So it's a very good question because it was very hard to do. But basically, I've gone through and I've listed every single address where we've had a representation from, and that's what we're referring to in here, the 117 addresses. And then we've got broken it down in terms of the numbers for and against. The actual number of representations in terms of emails, letters, is probably quite a bit greater than that, because some people, the gentleman who's written the email that you've read today has written many times, not only to myself, but to the county council, local members, parish council, and I've been copied into those. So it was actually quite hard to do. So that, as best we can, that's a fair reflection on the number of people that have commented.
Members.
Thank you for that clarification. So this is addresses as opposed to, so if two people that live in the same house, essentially we've calculated one representation from that house. because that was just a bit unclear. Also, a lot's been said about the hours of use. And I may well have read this at some point, but this clarification has gone on for quite a while, so I feel like I'm slightly struggling. You said there are existing restrictions on the hours of use, or there are no restrictions? My understanding was no restrictions.
No restrictions on the hours of use. It's
This
been
is-
there for absolutely
So this is just
decades
restriction for the lights. So as I say, in the summer, till 10 p.m, this could be happening regardless.
Right.
In the conditions, appreciate it's given times for the lights. Is there any way of conditioning that if the pictures are not in use, then the lights don't go on? Or is that something that is just left to the management? I'm just thinking they can be set on a timer to come on at that time every night, or if they're just used when there is occupancy, then that does reduce and mitigate a bit for the...
They would save on electricity and not use them when they're
I would
not being
hope so,
used.
but you don't
It does
know.
say, Councillor Heather Williams, the netball courts and associated sport lighting shall not be used outside the hours of. So
Yes, outside the hours of, Chair, but that's not my question.
Okay.
My question is, and it might not be possible, but just, or perhaps will we be able to attach an informative that when the courts are not in use, the lights should not be on. Because while I might put up with it as a local resident for the benefit of being able to have sport running, if I saw them on with nothing happening, that would rub salt into wounds.
Yeah, we can amend, actually I'd rather amend the condition rather than an informative, to add in that if the courts aren't in use, the lighting shouldn't be in use either.
Yeah, that's good. Right.
If everyone's agreed, I think that would that'd be helpful mitigation.
Okay. So are there any objections to that? No. Okay. Councillor Harvey. Remember, folks, we're still in matters of clarification at present. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise the matter of acoustic lensing, because I think it's well known that normally during the daytime temperature falls with height, and therefore sound is reflected or guided upwards. Especially on summer evenings, you can have a temperature inversion. It tends to refract sound upwards and then back downwards. So my question is, I could quite imagine that effectively there's a line of sight connection between the back of the court and the nearest houses, because the sound would go over a 3-metre fence and back down again. So my question is, has the acoustic modelling taken into account those effects and at that level of sophistication?
Thank you. Melissa or Rebecca?
I think the honest answer is I don't know. I have read the acoustic assessment, but it's a technical document. I mean, I'm happy to go back through and come back to that if that's helpful, and I can check.
Do you mean as part of this meeting today? You'll have a look. Thank you very much.
If I can just come back, because we might not need to do that, the environmental health officer, who it would be more of an expert, or the expert compared to us as the planners, they have reviewed the noise survey and the different noise levels together with the metrics and the mitigation involved, and they were satisfied. They raised no objection. So in short, I don't know what the noise survey set out and if that was taken into consideration, but the environmental health officer, who is our expert, was satisfied with the noise survey results.
Yes, that's all set out at 6.20 on page 74. It's not as detailed as the sort of question that you were asking, Councillor Harvey, but I must say I was slightly concerned that the acoustic fence didn't seem very high, because 3 metres, 9 feet, okay, it's taller than most children, but noise does carry. Anyway, hey-ho. Perhaps Melissa can come back and advise us about that in due course. So, right. Oh, Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins, matter of clarification?
Just to confirm the point that's been made about the acoustics. I'm just looking at the report from the officer here.
Yes.
Which says the acoustic fence details supplied are suitable for this location and meet the standards recommended in the assessment.
It's suitable for this location and
Yes,
the standards.
and meet the standards recommended in the assessment.
Yes, okay.
So that's the idea
Yes,
from our officer.
6.22, yes.
Correct.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for reminding us about that. Right, so let's now move on to public speakers. So the first public speaker we have, Catherine Benson. Thank you. If you'd like to come forward, Catherine Benson is speaking on behalf of the New Road Residents Association. Catherine, before you start, can I just ask how many residents you represent in the New Road Residents Association?
The New Road Residents, sorry, is that coming across okay? Can you hear me?
Do bring the microphone closer to you.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
So sorry. Hi, you can hear me okay?
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
how many residents
How many
are you?
residents? Well, we're a nascent group at the moment, but we have a chair, treasurer and secretary, and we're in the process of being set up. Originally, there was a setup of a company, I believe, as a New Road Residents sort of area, but I'm seeking to regularise that into...
I'm just trying to get it. I'm not
I
trying to pin
believe
you
we-
down. I'm just wondering how many people you're representing.
And I believe I'm representing, or at least myself, questionably my husband, and definitely someone who's very keen on emailing people, and someone who lives on the road but is often off on holiday.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so Catherine, you have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll just warn you when it's 2.5 minutes. So take your time.
Yes, and thank you for ensuring clarity on whom I'm representing at this point.
Thank you. Do go ahead.
Lovely. So, thank you for letting me address you today. I was wondering about a sort of theme like Back to the Future. And I'm sure it is of great interest, and I'm sure you read it every night before you go to sleep. It's a great aid. The Town and County Planning Act of 1947, which I'm sure you're all deeply familiar with. Isn't it a wonderful utopian vision of vitality and that post-war period? You know, time happens, things change, stuff moves on, and I know this is a very grandiose sort of opening for what is, in fact, an argument which is all about, and on the theme of, for want of a nail. As was noted earlier in the meeting, land classification and things changes over time.
Can I ask you to focus on what your objections are?
Yes,
please? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I understand that the netball courts have been in abeyance for since pre-COVID. I'm not quite sure when the last competitive match was played there. I understand it is currently condemned by the Netball Association. I'm not quite sure on the terminology there. I'm hoping that weighing into the balance, well, I appreciate time isn't a material consideration necessarily, but I do think the extensive use of New Road, which is increasing, not least from the filtering between junctions, the A14, but also by the number of places and facilities on the road, not least at the Impington College site, which include the original college, the sixth form, international sixth form, the new Cavendish school, free school, I understand, brought in by government at that time, and I gather it's going to have a sixth form soon too, which is all brilliant provision for children within the area, and not least the Impington Sports Centre, and we're going to hear from that person later. But there are several applications in at the moment.
You've got 30 seconds
for that
left.
site. A lot of applications. One retrospective application for parking. There's a lot of issues around the travel and transport. So, you know, I do feel that that's affecting the character of the area, and a question on the sustainability and the reference to all the different policies, which you, Melissa has very kindly listed out.
I'm sorry, Miss Benson, you've used up your time.
Thank you. Yes, and I think they're listed under 5.7.
You've used up your time. However, members may have questions to ask you, Miss Benson.
Yes, thank you so much, particularly the presumption in favour of
Miss Benson,
sustainable
would you
development.
stop?
Thank you.
Thank you. Would members like to ask Miss Benson any questions? I will ask you one, and that is, could you say in one sentence, what are your major concerns about this site? What is your objection?
My objection is...
I'm going to keep you to a very short time frame.
I understand. My objection is that the site is, or perhaps will be, very developed, and there are very grand ambitions that the ELA Multi-Academy Trust have for the location, which don't appear to be joined up.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Very overdevelopment of the site and perhaps a lack of planning, I think is what I'm understanding from you.
Really helpful.
Thank you. A master plan would be helpful. Great, thank you very much. Right, so thank you very much indeed for your time, Miss Benson, and thank you for coming. So I'm now going to ask Becky Cherms, who is the commercial manager for ELA Active Limited, who are the applicant on behalf of IBC. Would you like to come and speak? Miss Benson, would you like to return to the seats at the back? Thank you. Thank you, Becky.
I was going to say morning, but it's afternoon now. Afternoon. I was going to say good morning, everyone, but it's actually afternoon now. Right. It's good afternoon, everyone.
So you have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll warn you at 2.5. So thank you. Do go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. So, Impington Sports Centre previously hosted all Cambridgeshire netball leagues, along with several local clubs. The facility also hosted netball performance and development programmes, as well as holiday camps and regular tournaments for primary schools and across the district. In addition to the community use, the courts are a valuable facility for the delivery of PE classes, as well as extracurricular sports activities and vital wellbeing and exercise sessions for the 1,458 students of Impington Village College and the 114 students at Cavendish School. In 2019, the Sports Centre successfully bid for match funding from England Netball and Sports England to resurface the courts and install floodlighting. Although a planning application had been submitted in winter 2019, the COVID outbreak disrupted the application process, but approval was granted in July 2020. Despite a successful application, financial losses of approximately 650k during the COVID closures and a slow industry recovery put on hold all non-essential financial expenditure and facility development, which unfortunately meant that works were not started within the designated timeframe. Following a successful application to the South Cambs District Council
for a grant from the Rural England Fund. The courts are now due to be resurfaced in this January 2025, and it is hoped that if this application is successful for the floodlights, these will follow as a subsequently second phase of works. Locally, the lack of facilities for netball across the area has not only increased demand on the courts still open, but it has unfortunately resulted in the loss of a number of clubs and league play over the last few years. Following tennis and netball court closures in Cottenham and Milton due to unsafe surface conditions, clubs, leagues and community groups have either had to relocate to Northstowe or sadly fold completely. In Impington, there is currently only one court with floodlighting, which is located on the Histon Recreation Ground, and as a single court, this is unable to meet the needs of the local adult and junior clubs, and the issue exacerbated as this court is dominated by the local tennis club. Subsequently, both the adult and junior sections of the netball club now have lengthy waiting lists, with women and girls across the area unable to play the sport they love due to the lack of facilities. The parish council has recognised that this is an issue and that there is not enough capacity for the increased courts on the recreation ground, and has worked in conjunction with the ELA Trust and formally voiced its support for the installation of the floodlights at the IBC site. With exclusive use in the term time 3 to 4:30, the installation of floodlights will also enable the PE department to offer year-round after-school netball and tennis training, along with inter-school matches, as well as continue extracurricular wellbeing sessions for autumn and winter months. The facility will also be a much valued site for all with the housing developments that are now in Waterbeach, where there is a significant growth area and new development where there are no facilities, that this is an interim period of ongoing building. I'll just wrap up by saying that one last point to note that has been discussed today, that although the application includes, we are happy to keep the trees in, if that helps.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that although the application does advise the removal of the ley landi trees, we are happy to be led by planning, and we have sought expert advice, and should the condition be that we need to keep the ley landi trees in, we would be happy to do so.
Thank you very much. I gave you a bit of extra time because I had given Miss Benson a bit of extra time, so fair dues. I'd just like to ask a question of clarification. We've been advised by Rebecca Smith that if you've reiterated the offer to leave the trees there, but the impression we got was that the trees would have to be removed if the acoustic fence was to be installed, because there's not enough space. So can you just clarify?
So it would be one or the other. So if we were to, if the ley landi trees were to remain in situ, there would not be an acoustic fence, so we could not have both. So the preference from the original submission was to have the acoustic fencing. However, we have then sought further expertise and advice based on court preservation and management, which means that we can keep the trees in if that is the preferred decision of planning. However, the other option is that we would then go for, without the trees, we'd go for an acoustic fence and have landscaping the other side of the fence.
Thank you. Members, does anybody else have a question? So, Councillor Garvey.
It was just about, it came up earlier about switching off the lights when the courts
Councillor Garvey, can you bring your microphone a bit closer to you for the benefit of the recording?
About switching off the lights when the court wasn't being used. Is that still planned?
Yes, absolutely. So we do, we have a facility that's in the city that actually has houses overlooking it much closer to the facility than we have at Impington. And the situation we have there is that we will put the lights on ourselves manually when the courts are in use, and then there is a designated timer. They actually run through till 9:30 on that site. As I said, the houses actually overlook the Astro pitch that we've got there, but they are on a timer, so they can't extend. They don't extend later than that time. But they would only be on while the facility is being used.
Okay, right. And Councillor Peter Fane.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned that you have a system that would turn the lights off automatically on another site at 9:30. I noticed that in their response, Histon Impington Parish Council have no objection to this. They mentioned the hedge bordering the courts. They also say restriction on operation times of floodlights. They request that that be 9:30 rather than 10, would appear marginal. Would that have any particular impact on the use of the courts if that were to be the case?
No, I think 9:30, we would require to go up until 9:30 because of the times of the league play, and in the summer, when we've previously hosted summer leagues, which we will be resuming now that the courts are being resurfaced anyway, they did go up to about 9:30, 10 o'clock anyway, so it was quite standard. The courts will be used in the summer months to those times anyway, so 9:30 works well with us as well.
So you'd be amenable to an adjustment of our condition 5 that says these netball courts and associated sports lighting shall not be used outside the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Friday. So you'd be happy to change that to 9:30?
Yes, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Rebecca.
Sorry, Chair, just to point out that the description of development as it stands is for the floodlighting and the acoustic fencing. If members were minded to take the offer of changing the description of the development, that's a different application that we would need to consult on.
We do that, partly because the school site is entitled to do whatever they want with the trees. That's not part of this application. Also, what I notice that the trees are old, or they are very old, and they haven't been well looked after. So, although that might be, preferable in terms of that they're taller than the acoustic fence will be, that means that the college would have to undertake a considerable
Sorry, Chair,
amount
are
of
we entering
maintenance.
debate now?
Sorry, I'm just...
Are we entering debate now?
Not yet,
Point
no.
of
I'm just
clarification.
clarifying something with the officer. My understanding is that that is something that they could do if they wanted to, but are you proposing that we consider...
No, I was advising that the description is the description.
Is as it is, yes,
and if at a later point following your debate you wish to consider it, then we would need to go back out to consultation.
Yeah. Right.
No, I just wanted
okay.
I wanted the members to hear exactly what Rebecca had said.
Yes, okay. So we're looking at this application as it stands. And did you say if we wanted to amend any further conditions we had to come back, or?
No, sorry, Chair, it was if you wanted to amend the description to exclude the fence.
Then it would have to go out to further consultation with the members, yeah, okay, with the residents. Okay, so we're looking at this application as it stands, members. So, does anybody want to indulge in debate? Well, Jackson Wood, sorry, Councillor Jackson Wood.
Sorry, just for debate, can I just ask one quick question?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. When you went through your details, it was quite quick, but you actually mentioned some financials at the start. From what I gained from it, at the moment it's not financially viable for you to have the courts as they are. Have I understood that correctly? And this is why the application is actually in process.
No, sorry for the confusion. That was based on the original application that was put in 2019. So originally the Sports Centre in the Village College had received a successful application for match funding from Sport England and England Netball, which is where the planning application came through in that time. However, there was match funding required from the organisation, which essentially due to the COVID closures, there were 650k's worth of losses over the 2 years of COVID. Therefore, all non-essential spending was put on hold, and we are now in a position where the business, where the organisation and the school and the sports centre are now operating, well, better, but certainly as strong as they were pre-COVID now anyway. So we're now in a position to be able to reinvest back into the facility now and make the improvements that we should have made many years ago.
Thank you.
Okay, right, thank you. And you weren't able to implement that planning approval because You didn't have the money to
No.
do the match funding?
No.
Right, okay. Right, so let's move on. Thank you very much,
Thanks, everybody.
Ms. Chalmers, that's really helpful. And let's move on into debate then. So Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins first.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's interesting that the last point was about the previous planning application back in 2019, which is where I was going to start, really, because the principle of installation of the acoustic fence and the lighting has been established. And at the time, the row of leyland trees were going to be removed as well. I mean, I'm looking at that plan here right now, and that is on that was the basis upon which the approval was given. So it seems to me that this current application is just reflecting back what they previously had applied for and could not implement, as we've heard, because of cost and COVID and all that. I quite hear the concerns of the residents of Park Drive, and I had to go and look at the lighting plan and prediction and the type of lights that had been proposed. And I can see, I mean, the plan that had all those numbers on it, sort of looking at it on my screen here, I can see that the intensity actually goes down to 0 by the time it gets to the houses on Park Drive. And in theory, that works. The question is, in reality, does it work? Potentially, yes, they will see it, but the question is the effect that will be perceived. But what we can go on is the evidence that we have been given. And on that basis, it seems to me that the installation should be permitted. In terms of acoustic noise, I just want to read something out to members, if I may, from our environmental health officer, which says the granting of permission does not indemnify any action that might be required under the Environmental Protection Act 1990 for statutory noise or lighting nuisance. Should substantiated noise or lighting complaints be received in future regarding the use of the netball courts, and if it is considered a statutory noise lighting nuisance at neighboring premises, a noise/artificial lighting abatement notice will be served. So, that's from our environmental health officer.
Yes.
In their statutory response to this application, which means that the concerns that the residents of Park Rise have is not being ignored. What we're saying is, even if this is granted, it doesn't mean that if there is a problem in future, that it cannot be mitigated or corrected. Okay? And finally, for me, on the issue of highways and traffic, which is not part of this, just to say that highways themselves have said it's an established use, the netball court, and they don't consider that any increase in vehicle trip will be severe. So as far as they're concerned, it's okay. I think for me, on the basis of those 3 points, I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Right, Councillor Dr. Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by saying, actually, I think that is an important point that Councillor Dr. Hawkins just made, which is that if there is light pollution problem, it can still be dealt with by the environmental health team. Just on this application, I'll be honest, I find this one quite difficult. I can understand the residents' concerns. And I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure what's meant by light spillage, but I find it difficult to assess the evidence or that there will be no light spillage, because I think it's inevitable. Light moves, light bounces. So that even though the light might not glare from the back of the floodlights, it will obviously create create glare. It will create some light spillage in a literal sense. So I do find that evidence slightly difficult. Having said that, given the previous permission, and I don't think there's been any material change in planning policy as between 2019 and now, it would be difficult to sustain or find a reasonable ground to object, given the evidence that we don't have any evidence of negative impact on the neighbours, even though I don't quite accept the evidence that we've got, but we certainly don't have anything else on the evidence that says there'll be no impact. I'm not sure I quite accept, but there is a lack of evidence on the other side. So I think, given the 2019 permission, we would struggle to find reasons for decline. But I must admit, I am reluctant to support.
Thank you. While we're talking about lighting levels, can I just draw members' attention to, because I think it relates to the issue of whether you can see that something's lit at distance or whether that light actually impinges on you. And at 6.23 on page 75, it says, under the Environmental Health Officer's report, who gives no objection, they say the lighting levels required for the England netball criteria are very high on the court area. I think they mean height in terms of high, not height in terms of lux. And consequently, glare is likely to be visible from the height of the proposed lighting columns. However, from the information provided, it appears direct overspill at ground level is contained predominantly within the sports area. So it suggests there might be some perception of light, but certainly nothing very much outside the immediate area of the court. Any other people wishing to engage in the debate? I mean, my feeling is this application or a similar application for work on this netball court was approved in 2019, and as others have said, I don't see any grounds really for us to refuse this application on the basis of the report that we've received. I'm reassured, thank you Councillor Hawkins for finding the element that, you know, if there is a problem with lighting, then residents can complain to our environmental health officers and it can be reviewed. So I'm comfortable with that. I think we're all concerned about issues to do with parking, and I'm much reassured that we've suggested an amendment, was it to condition 6, that related to drawing up a car park management plan and submitting that to our officers, but drawing it up in consultation with parish and local residents, because I think that will go some way towards at least letting the college understand the concerns of the residents and what they need to do in this traffic management plan to make their activities on the site acceptable and reasonable for the residents. We've also amended the hours. I think if we're agreed that it would seem reasonable that 5A, condition 5A, might be reduced to 9:30 instead of 10 o'clock at night from Monday to Friday. And that's all the other ones that I have picked up. Rebecca, did you want to? Oh yes, that's right, yes. And Rebecca, did you want to pick that up, the other one about not having the lights on when the court wasn't being used? Do you want to run through them?
I can, if everybody's finished speaking.
Nobody else has put their hands up, so I'm sort of withdrawing to, if you'd like to move to the recommendation. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Peter. Peter, Councillor Fane, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I don't propose to deal further with the question of noise or indeed intensity of lighting. I think others have dealt with that. And as you say, we may be considering a change to condition on the hours. I think we should take very seriously the response of Sport England, who drew attention to the potential benefits of this, which we bore in mind in 2019. They say that the flood lighting system proposed is suitable for tennis and netball and will allow for extended hours of availability during the winter months, essential as it will offer sports development benefits by enabling the use of the courts by the community all year round. And indeed, we have also comments from a local netball club, not quite sure whether it's Histon or Girton or both, supporting the application because they struggle with getting access to viable netball courts in the north of the city. And this will provide a community asset. Now, the Sport England in their comments say that the conditions that may be opposed by the council relating to the hours should not be overly restrictive. It sounds to me as though a minor change to 9:30 would not be overly restrictive. And with the change of that condition, I would strongly support that we take the officer's recommendation and approve this subject to the conditions as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Fane. So we have a proposer, Councillor Fane, and a seconder, Councillor Timmy Hawkins. But can we just run through the recommendations, Rebecca, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, officer recommendations to approve subject to the conditions set out within the report with some amendments to condition 5, part A to amend the end time to 9:30 p.m. rather than 10 p.m. as shown at the minute, and also to add some wording in to say the lights are not to be switched on if the courts aren't in use. And then also amendments to condition 6 for the traffic and car park management plan to be drawn up in consultation with local residents, and also to include wording about a mechanism to review, which we have used in the past on conditions. I haven't got the exact wording, apologies. I think that was all the amendments, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, that's helpful. Right, okay, so members, we've got a proposer and a seconder, so can I propose we go to a vote? And the recommendation is on page 90 at paragraph 11, and it is to approve, subject to the planning conditions below and the minor amendments that Rebecca has just given us. So if you're in favour of that recommendation, can I ask that we go to the vote? If you're in favour of that amendment, you press green. If you object, you press red, and if you're abstaining, you press yellow. We've got we've got 11. There should be 10. Okay, so we're all there. So that's 9 in favour and 1 abstention. So the officer recommendation is carried. Thank you very much, members. Right, thank you for that. And I'm proposing we just crack on, if that's okay. Can I just thank Miss Benson and Becky Chums for attending and giving us the opportunity to ask you some questions. Yeah, exactly. My suggestion is that we continue with our agenda with item 8, which is Barrington, 28 Glebe Road in Barrington, and this is a 2-storey front extension and external alterations. Thank you. And the applicant is a relation of a member or an officer of the council, which means that these items must come before us. So the presenting officer is Helen Newman, who I think is just setting up, and the officer recommendation is to approve the application subject to the conditions, but I'm sure
Helen Newman will take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that, everyone. Technical glitch.
That's all right, Helen. In your own time.
Thank you. I'm presenting application reference 24037001H which relates to 28 Glebe Road in Barrington, which is seeking planning permission for the erection of a 2-storey front extension and external alterations. This case has been brought in front of members today due to the applicant being an officer for the council. There have been no amendments made to the scheme since the application was submitted. The application site is a detached dwelling located in the development framework of Barrington on the southern side of Glebe Road, shown here on the location plan, the aerial photo and the mapping portal, which confirms that there are no site constraints. The proposed site plan shows the ground coverage proposed from the front extension, which is further demonstrated by the floor plans on both the ground floor here and the first floor in this slide. The elevations detail how the proposal will look from the street scene with the wider images. So currently this is what the house looks like. It's the one with the white cladding on, circled there with the neighbouring houses. The proposed changes consist of a 2-storey front extension that will sit off-centre to the left with a tiled pitched roof and eaves matching that of the existing post dwelling. The triple-paned window to the principal elevation on the first floor will be obscurely glazed, which is existing. A further window is proposed on the ground floor on the east elevation, which will serve a downstairs toilet, and the high-level window that's on the same elevation on the first floor will be bricked up. The proposal outlines that the hung tiles present on part of the existing dwelling are to extend across the whole front elevation, thus removing the existing render that is currently underneath the left-hand first floor window. And the front door is proposed to be flanked by 2 smaller clear glazed windows. Officer recommendation is that of approval, subject to conditions and a tree informative, given the design and scale would sustain the character and appearance of the dwelling house and the wider area, and there is not considered to be any impact on amenities of the neighbouring properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Do any members have any requests for clarification from the officer? No. Peter Sanford. Councillor Sanford, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In my role as pedant of the day, can I just point out the printed copy of the papers list a member site visit date of 4th of December 2024.
No, it's not correct.
It was not included in the formal site visit. It's possible members have visited independently, but that should say none.
That's quite correct. Thank you, Councillor Sanford. I can't see any other questions from members, and indeed all of the consultations have returned no objection, or none received. This does not look a problematic application, and the recommendation is for approval. It seems perfectly reasonable given the context of the location and the likely impact, i.e. minimal, on the street scene. So I'm prepared to recommend approval for this and approval of the officer recommendation. unless anybody would like to discuss it any further? No? Okay. So, Rebecca, did you want to summarise at all, if there's anything to summarise?
Just that officer recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions, there's 3 of them set out in the report and 1 informative on page 101 of your printed agenda. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I second it.
Yes,
Thank you, Councillor.
Right, okay, so members, let's go to the vote. So if you're in favour, it's green, object, it's red, abstain is yellow. So that's 9, I think we're 10, yeah, so that's unanimous approval. Thank you very much, members. So, the next item on our agenda is item 10, so that's decisions...
9.
Sorry, 9. Oh, it's come on the supplementary paper, yes, okay. So 9 is the report to us from compliance. Rebecca, did you have anything you wanted to raise on the report?
I was just going to point out, unfortunately Chris isn't here today, but the only thing I was going to point out was, sorry, scrolling, that since the last report came, we have now updated our priority A cases so that visits have to be carried out within 1 working day. Previously, the target for officers was 5 working days, but now they have to carry out a site visit on priority A cases within 1 working day of the complaint being registered with us. So those are the cases that are in the report. It sets out their work which is irreversible or irreplaceable, such as damage or loss of listed buildings or protected trees. I think that was the main area I was going to draw your attention to. The statistics are in Appendix 1 and 2 in terms of caseload and compliance with targets. For example, we are in the process of working on some new indicators which we should be measuring from January, so I think by the time you get your next report we will have some additional service indicators within there as well. Thank you.
Any questions for the compliance report? No, thank you very much indeed. And can you convey... Oh, sorry, Councillor Khan.
I was just going to ask if the officers found the 1 day manageable.
Sorry.
For responding to the A cases in 1 day.
Yes, we've been working it since the beginning of October, and yes, we don't get too many priority A cases, but yeah, we have found them manageable.
Good. That's good to hear. So we look forward to the revised form of report in January. That's great, or the update. So, thank you very much. And that is for noting, I suspect, although I'm not advised how to handle that. Was it for noting?
Yeah, just to note.
Yeah, thank you. So, moving on then to agenda item 10 relates to appeals, and I imagine you're handling this one, Rebecca?
Yeah, you get me as well for this one. So just it's set into, as per usual, various appendices. The first one is decision notices that we've received. You'll note the first item was an appeal against an enforcement notice in Great Abington. So the notice has been upheld. It was amended by the inspector to add in, so the steps required were to remove the development as built. However, the inspector added in a step that they could amend the development to make it in accordance with the planning permission rather than remove it in its entirety. And they have 5 months within which to comply on that one. And the others are either withdrawn or dismissed. And then the rest run through. Unfortunately, the dates are still wrong in the report for the local inquiry. That is happening in April for land to the south of Sheer Fen. And then appendix... Sorry,
just to clarify that's the one that's listed as 11th of
February. I did correct it last month. It's actually the first... It's a week. We've had the case management. We're hoping to do it within a week, but it is set for 7 days, working days, in April.
Thank you.
And then Appendix 4 is 4 pages of appeals that we're awaiting decisions on.
Yes, thank you. And this is because we're awaiting legal representation with the appropriate expertise for some of these, isn't it?
No, it's awaiting the decision from the Planning Inspectorate.
Okay. Yes, sorry, that's what it says. Okay, right. Can I just say that on the first appendix, I just wanted to say how pleased I am that the appeals that have been brought against decisions have been broadly dismissed or withdrawn, and that suggests that we're perhaps learning as a planning committee and making sound decisions, which the inspectors can support, which is good. So much relieved. Okay then, members, if you have any, does anybody have any questions on the appeals report? No? Okay, so thank you very much. Can I just clarify the date of our next meeting? Is it the 15th of February or 15th of January? Lovely, thank you very much, Simon. So, looking forward to seeing you all. And just before you leave, I'll mention something after we've finished the recording. But thank you very much indeed, members. Look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you. Thank you.